Announce it. Not. I don't usually stream at this time. Let's be honest. If no one even watches, I'll just like. I guess I don't know. I can keep the stream on anyways. It doesn't really matter. I'm thinking like worst case, I can just redirect people to Tiberius D's stream. Be what it be. All right. Someone yesterday told me about Dune Awakening, and it's not out yet, is it? Wait, what? Dune Awakening on Steam? It's just the page, right? Let me check it out. Dune Awakening. Yeah, it's not out yet. What's it gonna be? An open world survival MMO on the Dune planet. Yo, that could be fire.
Find others, friends. You wander the dry, dirty streets of civilization.
That could be sick. I'm a huge Dune nerd, so
in the ancient
I love
halls
the
of
books.
the
I love the movies.
You
No
find
more the new
answers.
movie than the old one, but still all
You
good.
seek the secrets of the ever-shifting sands. Spice.
Space. Oh no. It's gonna be... Okay, I already know the gameplay loop, by the way. It's gonna be just resource gathering and PvP. That's gonna be the gameplay loop.
You do all of these
Well, I guess
things
PvE
in my
against
dreams,
the worms
sleeper.
and stuff.
I am terrified of what happens when you awaken.
Okay. No gameplay, I
must not
imagine, right?
fear.
This is all new.
The little death that brings total.
Yeah. The little death in French is a euphemism for orgasm, by the way. Just just so you know. Just putting it out there.
Fear is gone. There will be nothing.
Gotta spread the knowledge. I love riding a big worm.
Only I will remain.
Dunk, the great movie or video game, I guess. Do they know when they plan on releasing it? Probably not yet. Control Arrakis, blah blah blah. 29 curators have reviewed this product. No. Why? How? You don't review a game that hasn't even come out yet. What are you talking about? Recommended. How do you recommend a game that, like, you haven't ever seen gameplay of? What are you doing? Okay. Pog, daily streamer. Hey, Ringo. Yeah. Look, I'm getting back on that schedule. I'm getting back on that grind set. Look. Repping that TwitchCon t-shirt. Professional streamer. Seriously though, I'm most definitely gonna take a break on Monday. Like tomorrow. Well, actually, I'm saying tomorrow, but it's in like literally 10 hours. In 10 hours, I'm gonna be. I want to live IRL stream the Chinese New Year's parade here in Paris, and then on Tuesday, I wanted to do it last week, but I couldn't really. I'm thinking I'm gonna commit to documenting and IRL streaming the protests against the retirement age switcheroo. I should go with at least one protest and document it. I think that would be cool. Pod content. It will be, time zones, okay? Like I said, the parade in 10 hours. That's not a very US friendly time zone. The protest will be something similar. So like afternoon here. So I don't know. I don't know about the viewership on those things, but hey, it is what it is. But yeah, I mean it's cool to like make content. I agree. I like it. You're such a fucking hoe. I love it. Forspoken. Someone asked me if I would like to play the Dunk Awakening MMORPG yesterday, so I was looking at the trailers. But like, there's no gameplay. I assume it's just gonna be another. Well, it's gonna be another one of those like crafting and resource gathering type MMOs. I mean, it's gonna be like Minecraft basically, right? With maybe more emphasis on PvP or something. Fire Song, absolutely Fire Song. I mean, say what you want about Kanye, he's an anti-Semitic nut job, but damn, that guy knows how to make music. That guy knows how to make music. Anyways, yeah, so for tonight, in for roughly 15 minutes, we're gonna hop onto panel. I'm gonna try not to fall asleep in the middle. It's starting 2 a.m. here, and I took a nap in the evening, but this dude, going on American panels is rough for me. It's absolutely rough core. I don't know. In the meantime, we're just chilling. I'm looking at things. I heard bad stuff about Watch Dogs Legion. Yo, what I was thinking, speaking of like video games and gaming, I was thinking I should maybe start a Witcher 3 playthrough on stream, but I don't know if that's like good content or not. And obviously that depends on me. It's on me to be entertaining, but like I don't know if I don't know. I do want to actually play it, and I feel like Lust Theory, sexual content, nudity, mature, NSFW. Right, and that's the moment my girlfriend chooses to get up from bed and grab something from her bag while I'm reading about Lust Theory Season 2 on the Steam offerings. Oh yeah, she's saying that it looks great. Let's play together. Amazing. That's how you do it. See, Andrew Tate was wrong. You gotta hit him up with those NSFW video games. That's how you get him. I guess the other big question is, should I play Hogwarts Legacy? I mean, I'm not pre-purchasing. Fuck pre-purchasing. But I actually do kind of want to play it. I'm so sorry, but I really do want to play it.
Magic,
but I don't want to give any money to J.K. Rowling. I don't want to help fund anti-trans organizations indirectly.
Is the legacy of Hogwarts.
But I do want to do Hogwarts LARPing.
Now it is time to
like that was my dream as a teenager. You know what I mean?
These hallowed halls. And quite possibly shape the future of the wizarding world. Every corridor.
Also, I already have a fire.
Every stone in this castle.
I have a fire stream title for streaming Hogwarts Legacy already.
Here you will meet
or a series of them. Like very original ideas. Very, very high-minded, high-browed things. Goose Goose Duck, free to play. What is this? game of social deduction where you and your fellow geese must work together to complete your mission. Keep an eye out for those malicious mallards. This is Among Us. This is literally an Among Us knockoff. This is actually Among Us. It's the imposter Among Us. It's the imposter Among Us. Oh no. Oh no, it really is that. Oh no. I guess it's free at least. Yeah, this is literally the same game. With geese and ducks instead, I guess. All right, let's watch something before starting the debate. I also need to go grab some water. What was my... Wait, I had some... Where's my tabs? Oh yeah, here's the stuff. Wait, how long is this video? 15 minutes? That's a bit too long. How to make steaks at home, 24 minutes. And we can start watching this. I actually really wanted to watch this video for a while. I know it's not... I don't know if it's good, but I'm curious.
I cooked 15 steaks over the past few days and have the smell of beef permeated throughout my apartment so we could answer these topics and questions regarding steak. And a thank you to ButcherBox for sponsoring today's video and also supplying me all the steaks. They made this video a lot easier to make. More on that in a bit. The scope of this video is to give you a fundamental food science-based understanding of cooking steak at home. And really the three most important variables are just choosing your steak, salting your steak, and applying heat to your steak. Now, I didn't cover things like cast iron versus carbon steel pans or reverse sear versus sous vide, because in order to make and understand those videos, which I do plan on making at some point, we first need to start with the fundamentals. Lastly, all the sources I use to gather the information for this video are all listed down below, and they're also mentioned several times throughout the video itself. Sources like On Food and Cooking, The Food Lab, The Science of Great Barbecue and Grilling, Salt, Fat, Acid, Heat, The Professional Chef, all listed down below if you do want to read them for yourself and check them out. But with that, let's
last couple times I've cooked steak for myself, which I haven't in a long time.
When choosing a steak, the two main variables that have a large influence on how we enjoy that steak is number one, the fat content, and number two, the tenderness of the muscle that the steak was cut from. Let's talk about that fat first. According to the Professional Chef, there are 8 grades of beef recognized by the USDA.
But yeah, the last couple times I cooked steak for myself, it was good, but it wasn't great. And I know greatness is achievable. So I wanted to check out this video.
Now, obviously, if you are in a different country, these won't be the same, but they are great for helping me explain the differences. From highest to lowest quality, they are prime, choice, select, standard, commercial,
I don't care about USDA standards.
Now, if you're wondering why you may have never heard of 5 of those, it's because these are not used for human consumption, leaving us with prime, choice, and select. What's the difference? Well, it's all about the intramuscular fat, also known as marbling, which is the fat that exists inside the muscle. For example, on a New York strip steak, the exterior fat cap is intermuscular, meaning outside of the muscle, whereas the marbling is inside the muscle.
Oh.
Now, I don't want to hone in on the USDA system because it's different around the world. Instead, just look at the steak. Here's a choice New York strip versus the one from ButcherBox, and you can clearly see which one has
the marbling
more
is way
marbling.
better here.
This marbling has a direct effect on both the texture and taste of the meat. In terms of texture, this fat is solid at room temperature, but when it is cooked, that fat melts away, leading to juicier meat. In terms of taste, you may have heard the phrase, fat is flavor. It's actually the fat that provides us most of that beefy flavor that we know and love. For example,
not just in beef, fat is flavor in everything, okay? Like, let's not lie to ourselves.
A piece of steak from the same cut will taste less beefy than the same cut with more marbling and fat throughout. The cut of the steak, though, also makes a big difference in the fat content of the steak, which brings us to, what cut do I choose? When choosing a steak for pan searing, there are 3 that are probably most common: the ribeye, the strip steak, and the tenderloin, also known as the filet mignon. As mentioned in the Food Lab, for all 3, you are really making a choice between beefy flavor and...
Oh man, I hardcore disagree. Food is top tier. Food is literally the universal experience on Earth for all human beings. And on God, we've learned to make it divine.
Tenderness. Placing beefy flavor on the scale first, generally a ribeye will have the most.
I don't need people to agree.
The beefiest flavor. This will be followed by the slightly leaner New York strip, and then fairly far down on the list will actually be the lean tenderloin or filet mignon. The filet mignon is often the most expensive of the cuts, but it will actually have the least amount of fat and beefy flavor, which may make you ask, why do people covet it so much? Well, it's because of the tenderness. The filet comes from a muscle that is rarely used and is thus supremely tender compared to anything else. The New York strip is also tender, and then that is followed closely by the ribeye. Whichever you do choose is up to you. Test them out next time you go to the grocery store. For me, the New York strip is my go-to as I really prefer the balance of flavor and texture, but I absolutely love a ribeye as well. The filet mignon is actually my least favorite. The texture is incredible, don't get me wrong, but it's generally the most expensive and leaves a bit to be desired from a beefy flavors perspective, so that's why it's really nice to pair with a pan sauce or something like that.
All right.
So to sum up this section, first ask yourself, do I want a... Before we hop into the various
I want to look at the cooking. I don't care about,
let's first go over what does salt actually do to a steak. So first and most importantly, salt amplifies flavor. Secondly, it can affect the texture depending on when it is applied. From salt, fat, acid, heat, it is noted that salt has its own taste, but also enhances the flavor of other ingredients. For a steak, we want it to be salted, but we don't want it to taste salty. So for me, I generally eyeball it and make sure I just have even coverage all over the steak. But if you do want a rule, I like to use 1.5% salt by weight for a dry brine. So for a 280 gram piece of steak, this would be about 4 grams of salt. Now, if that's too salty for you or not salty enough, just use more or less depending on what you see fit. Another interesting tidbit about salt is that salt or well-seasoned food activates our saliva. So all else being equal, a well-salted piece of steak will be made juicier not only by the liquid in the steak itself, but also by the saliva that is released in our mouth as we eat it from that savory goodness. Now, I think everyone will agree that steak needs to be salted. But
is that why everything tastes better with salt? Fucking math majors trying to cook. Yo, Darks My Soul, how are you doing?
Talk about the more nuanced topic, when should steak be salted? So depending on when salt is added to the steak, it can affect its internal seasoning and its texture. Time is the variable we're looking to test here. So in general, you can salt your steak right before cooking, salt it in advance, or salt it after it's cooked. You see, when salt is applied to a steak, it begins to diffuse into the meat, internally seasoning it, and here's a test to see that. I salted a steak 2 hours before cooking it, and then salted one right before cooking it, seared them both, cooked to 130 degrees Fahrenheit internal, then let them rest before cutting off a slice to eat, and here's the plot twist, I cut the exterior off. The one that was salted 2 hours ahead of time tastes seasoned and enhanced still, but the one that was salted right before tastes fairly bland because all the seasoning was on the exterior. It didn't have time to diffuse into the meat. Now let's take texture into account.
That means you got to salt
also initiates osmosis, which draws water out of the steak, and you'll actually be able to see some water droplets on your steak after just 10 or 15 minutes, but don't worry, that water will go back in. With enough time, though, the salt dissolves protein strands in the steak that allow it to absorb and retain water as they cook. With these protein strands slightly dissolved, the more water they retain, and the juicier the meat will feel when you actually
on my steak base.
My question is, though, how much juicier?
Good call.
So these are the figures listed from a table in the Science of Barbecue and Grilling for brining. For a 1-inch steak, the bare minimum you need is about 2 hours, so I wanted to test both sides of that for both texture and flavor.
Damn.
I took 4 New York strip steaks, noted the weight down before salting, then salted one overnight for 18 hours, salted one for 2 hours before cooking, one right before, and then left one completely plain for cooking, which I will salt afterwards.
And this is a huge game changer for me. I've never tried it. I never tried to like brine it for hours before cooking it. I absolutely need to try this.
Sliced. I cooked all the steaks to 130 degrees Fahrenheit and immediately documented their weights after cooking, and here are the percentages for the moisture retention at each stage. So from this data, it looks like we can say that yes, salting in advance will increase moisture retention and thus juiciness. However, I will say the biggest factor for steak texture is what temperature the steak was actually cooked to. For example, even if you brine a steak but then cook it to 150 or 160 Fahrenheit internal, it's not going to be magically as juicy as one that was cooked to 130 or 135 that wasn't brined. Yeah, more on that in just a bit.
Cook it
the
to
more important
dryness.
benefit, in my opinion, is the even seasoning that we get from salt diffusion. And here are my thoughts and rankings on these various methods after tasting.
It's better like that after you burn it. What do you think of Taiwan? I know I've never been there. What do you mean? The Republic of China. Don't you mean the province of Taiwan? Isn't China a Taiwanese province? What do you mean?
Tasting them. So I have all these steaks and just taste tested all of them. Thought I'd give you my kind of personal ranking on the various salt methods.
This is number one or number two? Good question.
Like I would have no problem eating any of them. But to start with this one, this is seasoning after. So I cut it up, mixed in some salt, kind of mixed it with the juices and whatnot. So for me, this one is kind of salt forward. So it's because the salt is all over the exterior. It's kind of, you know, from the juices coating it with the salt. You kind of get a salt like reaction right away, which for me is not exactly what I'm looking for in a steak.
Memes aside, obviously Taiwan is its own country in all the issues that matter to define a nation, and China wants to annex it. Basically, that's like all I can say. What do you want me to say? Yo, Jokesa, how are you doing? Oh shit, the panel's in 5 minutes. Okay, we can still swing some meat around.
As you're biting through it, like it sticks on your tongue, but then it quickly goes away, and then you kind of just have like the
Taiwan doesn't believe itself to be a country. If you actually believe that, you are the bozo, my dude. You are the bozo. Like there's no sane definition. Like you can believe that Taiwan should be annexed by China, but there's no sane definition of what a nation is where you deny Taiwan being a nation. That is just insane, Cope. It's gonna happen eventually. Probably, yeah. China's been using the strategy of the fait accompli to gain more control over the South China Sea. I don't know. I guess with how Hong Kong got annexed, it's much more likely, but we will see. Yo, Magic Turtle. Taiwan is part of China, and there's only one China, dude. Like, okay, maybe you live in China, maybe you like need to like toe the party line and follow Chinese propaganda, but there's like when a country has its own government, or like okay, you don't believe it's country. When a region has its own government that makes its own decisions completely independent from the nation that is allegedly belongs to. One China's official policy of the USA and the EU. But do you understand why it's the policy? It's the policy because China really gets pissed off if people China. It's like the last barrier. China is okay with Taiwan being its own country, but it needs to uphold appearances. It's literally just appearances. If that is enough to delude yourself, you have a problem like perceiving things in the world. Yeah, the Republic of China, exactly, Nep. Taiwan calls itself the Republic of China. Yeah. But like that is the most, that is like that is a very naive understanding of what is the meaning of the Republic of China, what is the actual meaning of Taiwan diplomacy with the USA and the EU, etc., etc. All right. Let me hop into Tiberius's Discord. No more meat for us. Okay, I probably should like hop into general and he'll drag me in, I imagine. Or something. Wasn't Taiwan made by the people who ran from the mainland because they were afraid of being annexed or something like that? Taiwan, my understanding is that Taiwan was formed by the government in exile of China when they, when they fled mainland China because of Mao's. But basically, there was also the invasion of Japan. There was a lot of things happening, and Mao's army was basically the only real military and political force in China at that point. So they fled and they were able to basically function independently on the island of Taiwan. There would be no autonomous government in Taipei, and there would be no France if the US hadn't intervened in World War II. That doesn't mean France isn't a country. That is not an argument. Can I see this? Can you? Oh, can you see this? You're asking, or maybe you're asking President Bolsonaro.
I'm sorry, I did pull a few people.
Hello.
I did pull a few people into consoles and Legatus and VIPs. I reworked a lot of that because there was so many people with mod powers, it got a little stupid, so I just kind of reworked that.
No, more than fair. There were some people being dumb with it too. Nobody knew how to just like chill the fuck out. So I don't blame you. So the only really thing I gotta do is this.
Speaking of dumb people who do crazy shit, how's Samantha doing?
Oh, she would go there.
God damn. No
shots fired. All right, that's cool.
I mean, like, I feel like the outsider. I don't know any of this drama.
Okay,
it's
so
a friendly jab.
Yeah, true. Samantha Banana is a friend of ours, and she's part of the community for a while. But she's good at getting in trouble. We'll put it that way.
I mean,
right, I think
is she like robbing banks or what kind
He
of
likes
trouble?
using slurs.
think conservative trans person who runs around, saying what they think, whatever it may be. Yeah,
It's a landmine.
It's a landmine.
Oh, should I've seen Samantha Banana in like Sansol's chat, and yeah, she can be pretty spicy.
Yeah, she can
That's an
be
understatement.
very spicy.
She's a what is it? What is that spicy scale? She's like a 9 out of 9.
Got that hot sauce.
Oh no.
This ain't no teriyaki. We'll put it that way.
I
Not
can't.
sriracha.
Tiberius, you took away all my powers. I can't do my little stream overlay.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Is that what was required to do that?
Nah, I don't know. It's fine. Don't worry about it.
Okay.
It just means that people won't be able to tell who's stalking. That's all. It's not a big deal.
Oh, I didn't update this. Okay, so taxes and spending. And
Let me see. Closed room, yeah. Can't do it from the closed room. That's all good. Okay. No big
all right, I'm a little behind, but nothing too bad. Looks like everybody is here except for. And somebody remind me. I know we're down one.
There will be no optional.
Aiko, which he should be here in a moment.
The U.S. environment in World War II was not decisive. I don't know if it was not decisive. I know it's a big tanky talking point to minimize the U.S. involvement in World War II. Obviously, it's a big U.S. talking point to minimize USSR
I'll
involvement.
just make sure I'm not backwards to y'all, right?
You're good with me?
No, I mean, like, I can read stuff behind you.
So, yeah, we got Oyo, which I haven't seen for quite a while. He's at Chinchillas, and we have a Econo Boy. Mic test on you, sir.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, it's good to see you, man.
Yo, you got the audio overlay animation thingy too. Nice.
Yeah, I like
You
that.
know, if I'm not coming with a camera, I've gotta come with at least something a little extra. You know?
Now, see, there you go. Make me feel bad. Thanks.
Oh yeah, that's true. You're a fucking loser. Got him.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, guys. All right, we're 2 minutes behind the hour, so let's get started. Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Saturday Night Lights. I hope you're all having a wonderful time in whatever it is that you're doing. Of course, we are here with some wonderful friends. First and foremost, he is the guy behind Crowdsource Politics. You may know him as Cypher. He's a good friend of ours. We do a lot of content together. How you doing, buddy?
Doing well, man. Just got back from dinner, really, and got the itis, so I'll bring my best, though. Always good to be here. Appreciate it.
I hear you. I do. I'm currently working on a blizzard, and I'm actually recovering from a bit of a headache, so I might not be 100% when we start either. Next, he is kicking ass over there on the YouTubes, giving some real power to the economics profession. How you doing, Econo Boy? We haven't seen you for a quick minute.
Yeah, I'm doing all right. Still pushing out videos and having fun and talking to people and just doing my thing. It's been a fun time.
It's always a pleasure to have you here. You definitely go check him out, Econo Boy on YouTube. Always good content over there. Next, he is the PC Pimp, but of course everyone knows him as one of our favorite friends. It's good to see you, Osiris. How are you, sir?
I'm great. How's everybody doing tonight? I'm hoping we get some spicy arguments out of Cypher about taxes. The most boring thing I could. No, I'm just playing. No, it's good to be. It's always good to be talk to you guys.
Fair enough. But it's always great to have you, and we're hoping you're doing great with the 7 children. We were talking about that in the pre-show, so you know how it works.
Well, if you had 7 children, you know I'm not doing great. But let's move on.
Higher all the time.
We hang out with him a few times on my show when we go over to visit other people, particularly a guy named Chinchilla. Please welcome, it's Oyo. How are you doing, sir?
Hey, what's up? Doing pretty good. Staying up late for this since I'm on that wacky EU time, but hopefully I'll stay awake during the during the tax debate. But I think it's a cool topic, so I think we'll have fun.
It will be interesting since everyone is referencing it. We are going to be talking a lot about taxes and spending today. Before we get there, we've got two more guests. One of them isn't here yet, but he's not on camera. His name is Demon Machine. You can check him streaming pretty much every Monday through Friday from his garage. Not technically his garage, but the work garage. He's a automotive or certified automotive technician in a number of different brands. Most people, if you are in the Twitch community, probably are very aware of this man, but it's good to see you, sir. How are you?
Oh, fine. Just waiting for the lasagna to come out of the oven, and I'll eat some dinner. But other than that, happy to be here, and can't wait to chat with you guys.
Definitely go check him out. He's live pretty consistently. He even does weekend shows. Tomorrow he'll be doing Shit Talk Sunday, which is always a favorite of the right-wing friends of mine. So we'll definitely go have plenty of effort and time to go watch his particular content. He's available most time of normal working hours. But without further ado, our final guest has finally joined us for this evening, and had a wonderful time too. Please welcome iCal Rich. You guys know him, you love him. He's one of the favorite guests that we get to have on many panels out there. How you doing, sir?
Oh, not bad, not bad. I just literally finished teaching a class 1 minute ago.
Well, I appreciate you coming to join us and maintaining such a busy schedule, because I understand how that is. So without further ado, guys, again, today we're going to be talking a lot about taxes and spending, and if I need to jump into the ring myself, I will do so. But until then, the first topic is Republicans are moving to replace income tax with sales tax. Is this a good idea? And I'm going to turn it over to Cypher to start it out with. Oh, sorry.
No idea what's going on.
Cypher had his earphones out. I apologize. We're going to move it to Oyo first.
All right, sure. On its face value, I think it's a very bad idea, simply because income tax in almost any Western country, in most countries, is a progressive tax. Sales tax or value-added tax, whatever variation you make on it, are very regressive. Well, not very, but there are regressive forms of taxation. Meaning that they will affect much more people with lower income than people with higher income. So just outright replacing income tax with sales tax would be actually just taxing the poor more than the rich. It would be flipping around. For me personally, I'm more of from a left-leaning economic perspective. I think government taxation should serve a purpose in helping balance out inequalities and power dynamics in society, and help smooth things out that would harm people. So from my perspective, it's a very bad thing.
All right, thank you very much, good sir. I'm going to move it to Osiris next.
Like all things, I think the devil's in the details, and I don't know the details of what's being forwarded here. But on its face, it seems like it's not a very good idea. Like Oyo, that's how you say name. Oyo said, it seems like you're proportionally actually taxing across the board, which doesn't seem like a very good idea. Yeah, so unless other people have more details, I think I'm against this.
All right, fair enough. I'm going to move it over to iCal Rich.
Yeah, I live in Texas, and we have sales taxes here. Mainly, a big part of the reason is because we don't have income taxes. So on the state level, we kind of have gone in that direction, and I'm against it for the reasons that. Well, hold on a second. Oh, yo. For the same reasons that he stated. However, there are as Osiris said, devil's in the details. Interestingly enough, the British say God is in the details. So I think that's a philosophical difference between Americans and Brits. But for whatever reason, some fantastical being is in the details. And one of the things that you could do to improve this, I wouldn't make it replace income tax unless we also had something like a wealth tax, which we could talk about, which would be a big improvement. But if you were going to do it, one of the things that Texas does is it exempts things that poor people are likely to buy. So food is exempted, for instance. But there are more things that you could do. You could make clothing exempted. You could make a lot of items exempted. But if you exempted enough items to where it wouldn't be a great burden on the poor, it would still be a burden on the middle class as opposed to the upper class. So I would be against it across the board. But I do think that there are ways to improve the plan if it were to come down the pike.
All right. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn it over next to Demon Machine.
You're gonna hate the reason I support it, because I hate the reason I support it. And that's because the way you pay income tax is so insane, and how you have to do all the taxes, just how you have to calculate that bullshit is so insane that I would rather pay a little bit more so I don't have to deal with it. That's it. Like, it's just that easy. I know where that money's going. I know what it's going to. I know what I'm spending, and I know how much of it going to the government versus I'm going to get screwed. I started trying to buy stocks, but I really don't know what to do with them because I'm so afraid of getting screwed by taxes, which I just need to learn and actually get better at it. But, like, holy crap, it's terrifying if you don't know what you're doing. And that's something that, of course, they don't teach us at school. So you just got to figure it out. So have fun.
Just pay for that
That's
TURP
good
tax.
for me. Thank God.
He's definitely going to get me on that last part. The fact that we don't teach taxes in school is quite impressive. But next, we're going to move on to Cypher.
Yeah, sorry about that. My dog decided to pick up their squeaker toy right when we started, so that's why I went back. Anyways, so I'm against it because I used to be for it, and then I learned more about it. So basically, what it boils down to, and I won't take up too much time in the intro, is that what it's really trying to do is that the reason that a lot of conservatives and libertarians support this is because they want to include more people into the tax space, but exempt things that are like investment level classes. So if you buy a home, that's not going to get taxed. If you buy a stock and you're trading and you have to pay your broker, well, they're not going to tax the brokerage fee. They're not going to tax all the fees and services, and they want to put more of the burden away from the wealthy or the higher income earners, yours truly, and put it towards more of the poor. So that is why I am ultimately against it. Even if you do a prorate or a prebate to where you can refund people beforehand in order to eliminate some of the burden, it still ends up being a net negative to the poor and middle class.
All right, and that leaves Econo Boy to wrap it all up.
Yeah, I think that the plan is pretty bad. I mean, there's inklings of potentially good things in the plan. I mean, for instance, establishing some sort of universal prebate could be a good thing, but that doesn't have to necessarily be linked to sales taxes. I mean, it's effectively just a version of like a UBI, right? So if we got rid of a lot of tax sort of loopholes and stuff and just gave everyone a universal tax credit, I mean, sure, that might be better, right? But pairing it with this insane 30% national sales tax is probably bad for a number of reasons. Like a lot of other countries have versions of sales taxes, VAT taxes or retail taxes, stuff like that, which are fine, but those things fund very progressive sort of welfare institutions, right? If you're using a VAT to pay for things like food stamps or child benefits and allowances or healthcare systems, that's a way that you can justify having this sort of more regressive front-end tax, is because it establishes a very broad tax base that disproportionately helps people achieve benefits, whether it be public transportation, healthcare, stuff like that, right? So, but that's not what the Republicans are doing. They're doing the vacuous thing of just getting rid of one tax and replacing it with another much, much more regressive tax, even taking into account this sort of prebate thing. It doesn't really make up for it. I think the one part of the plan that I could maybe defend on its own is the part where it basically wants to replace the payroll tax with a sales tax. I think there is probably a strong argument for getting rid of the payroll tax. Getting rid of the payroll tax and replacing the funding for Social Security and Medicare with a VAT or a sales tax, just because it establishes a broader sales tax. It establishes a much broader tax base to fund very expensive government programs, and those programs are very progressive in nature. But again, that's a small inkling of a good thing, and as a part of a whole plan that's really terrible, which also includes defunding the IRS substantially, basically getting rid of the IRS and devolving the IRS authority into the 50 states, which is another completely insane idea. When you hear of, what do you call it, block granting out certain things to states, I mean, that's just a conservative way to essentially fuck up those systems and make them bad. So, I don't really like that idea either. So, the plan, in my view, is pretty bad overall. I wouldn't vote for it if I was a member of the House. So,
all right, thank you very much. Before I go into the next phase, I just want to ask this to the panel: is anyone against sales tax, but for some reason would be in favor of something like a VAT tax? Because I've met a few people like that, and I don't really get the I don't really get why they'd be for one against the other. So, any of you?
I definitely prefer VAT to sales tax personally. Oh, sorry. Go ahead. You come up.
yeah, I mean, I think I fall into that category where I think VAT taxes are better than sales taxes. Sales taxes are basically just taxes applied to the final good of a product, right? Whereas a VAT is applied at every stage of a product's development. And the way that VAT is collected and checked, it's sort of a market-based mechanism for checking the allocation of VAT. Whereas empirically, it seems like people are much more easily able to fraudulently get out of having to charge and collect and return the sales tax to the government. Whereas because of VAT is basically collected at every production stage and each company is sort of in charge of administering the VAT tax, it means that there's a double-ended sort of method of confirmation that the tax is actually paid properly. So there's not as much fraud with VAT taxes as with retail sales taxes like we do in America.
It also avoids the problem of double taxation with the flat sales tax. You can get like a company buying stuff from another company, paying sales taxes and then selling to people or another company, and then sales taxes are paid again. While VAT smooths all that out, basically.
Yeah, because you deduct the sales, you basically deduct the VAT from each stage of the production process that moves on. So you still end up with the retail customer paying the whole tax, but it's just a lot less sort of vulnerable to fraud and let's say mischievous actors in the economy. So
yeah, the person at the final point of sale collects it, but if they don't collect it, then it's been collected at the previous chain.
Yeah.
Essentially.
I mean, this plan is like it's a very like American tax plan, right? Which is, let's take sort of the thought in the other room of what the Europeans are doing and make it the shittiest implementation possible, and let's do that, right? That's kind of this plan's version of like the European VAT tax, right? And welfare system, and it is disappointing because there's potentially some good that you could do with tax reform in America that involves like a VAT or a sales tax, but this just ain't it.
I'm going to open it up to the panel, so if anyone wants to get in and argue, feel free to do so.
Can we look at this from the experiential level for a moment? Let's say you're on the lower income area. Not only are you potentially below the point where you would pay any income taxes at all, but you also would qualify for the earned income tax credit, which Ronald Reagan, by the way, praised as the greatest job creation tool like ever devised. And so here you are with somebody who has the earned income tax credit. So you're paying basically negative taxes at the lower end of the economic scale. And so not only would you not benefit from the end of income taxes, you would in fact have some of your income taken away as somebody at the bottom end of the economic scale. And on top of that, when you go out to buy goods and services, you're paying 30% more for everything. I mean, people are complaining about inflation today. If you're somebody in that bracket, you don't just not benefit from it. Your life has gotten considerably worse. And I understand that there is that like prebate to try to compensate for that. But I'm not convinced that somebody at that level, losing the earned income tax credit and having to pay so much more for goods and services, that it would be a net benefit to them. And I'm also not sure at the lower middle income or even middle income levels, if they would benefit either. It seems to me that all of the benefits go to the top, but I'm just saying experientially, what it would be like for that program to roll out, I think would be, worse than the ACA rollout. Just put that on steroids.
Ty, real quick, you're feeding back.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. I probably need to put noise cancellation on.
I was going to say your earphones are just close enough that it was picking it up.
Gotcha.
That is an aspect of this plan that I'm surprised Democrats haven't really picked up on. Is like the Republicans for the last year and a half have been talking about inflation. Inflation's a big deal, but then they want to make everything 30% more expensive. Fucking with this sales tax, it's like if you want to make things cheaper, I'm not sure adding an extra 30% on every single thing you buy.
What does it mean to like corporate taxes and all that shit?
Say again. Sorry.
Corporate taxes don't get.
I was gonna say that take it to corporate taxes and shit doesn't change.
So.
What do you?
No, the fair taxes are replacing the entire IRS, so it does get rid of corporation taxes.
Oh, okay. So
that's why
they're going to spend their money differently.
That's why it's going between 30 and 40%, depending on how you slice the numbers. They're playing gimmicky games with it right now. They're saying it's 23%, but that's an exclusive number. You get 30% if it's inclusive, and 40% if you're trying to make it revenue neutral.
Well, I think part of it is that.
Wait, what do you mean?
One of the reasons, though. Well, one of the reasons that the rate isn't determined is because in the bill it talks about replacing the payroll tax with a sales tax, but what it says, it doesn't say what the revenue requirement is. What it says is the Social Security and Medicare Administration each year will have to determine the rate that they need to charge. So one of the reasons why the 30% is just a floor is that the bill actually says that, well, this rate will be somewhat variable, right? So if the Social Security Administration says, well, right now we charge 12 and 4/10% to pay for Social Security, but an equivalent sales tax, we would need a 6.5% sales tax, but then the next year we might need so they change that over time, and so it's another way to decrease the headline rate.
Is that something I could see happen as a consumer? Like I go to the store and I notice the tax is a little higher, and I'm like, why is that? And they're like, oh, we started spending more on Social Security. And I said, oh, okay.
Yeah, that's kind of the point. Like,
I wonder if that would get people more interested in politics in general, though. If you think about what they had to constantly see in their face all the time, they can watch it go up and down in various other.
That's how to get them.
I think it would get them interested in bringing back the income tax.
Yeah,
it might get them interested in that. Yeah,
I mean, to be fair, when you pay a payroll tax, every time your paycheck is going to say tax withholding, and your tax is pretty apparently taken out of your check every single week or 2 weeks or month or however you get paid, right? So I don't know if
but there's a psychological ability to ignore the rest of the text because where the good stuff is. It's the little income that you have, the part that's going in your bank. That's all you really care about when you crack open your paycheck. A lot of people don't even check their pay stub. They just wait for the money to come in because it's direct deposited. So they don't even have to see a paycheck. They just get a copy.
That's part of their goal with it. But go ahead, Osiris.
I kind of want to focus on something Rich said about the idea that that this also makes low income people lose their earned income credit every year. Now, I think the earned income credit, the way that they distribute it, needs to be redone. I prefer they do it over the course of the year, maybe, or something different. But I don't think taking that away from I don't know how many Americans get that, but I'm gonna just ballpark and probably say like 20-30% of Americans are probably getting that at least. That seems like that's going to cause a huge problematic way of redistributing money, and I think this is where the problem lies, is the redistribution of the money, and this is why conservatives are wanting to do it this way.
Well, I think
there's a reason when there's a reason why Republicans, when they had the ability to completely change the tax code in 2017, didn't do any of the crazy shit that they're talking about in this plan, right? This is the equivalent of when the Democrats took the House in 2018 and they were passing like progressive bill after progressive bill after progressive bill. But the reality is, again, when the Democrats got in charge, only a portion of that stuff got done. And I think the reality also is that this plan would be so unpopular if it was ever actually pushed in a Republican-controlled government that I don't think it would ever really happen. And frankly, I mean, it's kind of like Lindsey Graham's proposed abortion ban, right? It's such an unpopular thing. It's surprised to even have them propose such a thing because I really do think it makes Republicans look pretty bad in general, right? But
I mean, they've been pushing this for a good decade or so, at least.
I mean, it's not.
But is this just a political like weapon, and they don't really give a fuck?
I think some other thing. I think it's just an attention stunt or something. I don't know. It doesn't seem very plausible that they would actually pass it.
I
don't see that. But
I'm a little black-pilled on this. I think it's possible. Certainly, the House, the way it is, I think is willing to do it. And I think that if the right president were elected in 2024, I think the only thing that could potentially stop it would be the Senate.
Yeah.
But
no,
but here's the thing: like, look at that tax bill from 2017, and the one time Trump took a big hit in popularity was after he passed that bill. It was very unpopular. I think Republicans are willing to pass unpopular things if they can lock it in through statute. And then, like, their donors can benefit over time. They were willing to do that in 2017. That bill, I understand that the bill didn't do everything that they threatened to do, like, when they weren't in power, but it still did a lot. And it locked in cuts at the top margin indefinitely, like it doesn't expire in 10 years like the middle class tax cut does. And it's something that just can't be reversed. So I think the lesson is, I think the way the Republicans are thinking now is that you can do something unpopular if you can lock it in. And that might be worth like losing an election cycle to get something like that done.
Yeah, and they won the messaging war afterwards on that one when companies started giving people bonuses as a tax credit to themselves and getting people to buy in. That was very much a marketing ploy that Trump actually deployed in order to get people to buy in. All these bonuses people were talking about, like, oh my God, the tax benefited me. I got this bonus. I'm getting paid more, blah, 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 blah. All a sham. Like, it's a sham because it was just a one-time bonus. They didn't get their increase in income. The rich got their permanent tax cuts, permanent in the sense of it can be repealed eventually, but that's going to be a lot of political capital to get it repealed. The doubling of the individual tax credit, the individual rate, so from 6.2 to 12.4 for couples, that was huge. That did a lot of good for people. But then people in middle class, especially in more expensive states, got crap from it as well, of how it was structured. But one of the things that I wanted to say was that part of the reason why they're pushing this is because at the end of the day, ideologically speaking, a lot of these conservatives don't want government to really do shit. And so if they can get the taxes more in your face, and every time you go spend $1, you're spending 30 cents more on that dollar to get anything that you want, they believe that more people would be against the existence of taxes, the existence of government, because it's more in their face. And that's why they're doing things like this.
Well, I disagree with that though, because again, everything like what we just described, right? That bill in 2017, the tax cut, was there were multiple provisions in that bill which cut taxes and alleviated tax burden for lower and middle income people, right? Whether it be increasing the standard deduction or just decreasing rates for like middle and lower income people. Sure, they had like a marginal rate cut for upper income people, and that's where you get that line of like 80% of the benefit goes to the top 1%. That's true, right? But they still paired it with middle class and lower class tax cuts. But when we're talking about this bill, right? If this bill were actually proposed in like a Republican completely controlled government, like, Ron DeSantis or Trump is president again, and then you've got a Republican Senate somehow, that this is like very transparently just a restructuring of the tax system that funnels money very, very directly from poor people to rich people, right? There's basically nothing in this bill that on net at all benefits lower income people, right? And there's not even really an argument. There's no provision they can point to where like, yes, this lowers your tax burden. Yes, this makes it easier for lower income people. They could do that in 2017, right? And that's maybe part of the reason why you say they won the war on that. I mean, to me, I might disagree with even that. But the point is, though, is that I think that with this tax bill, though, this would be such a transparent, plain increase in taxes for lower and middle income people. And to be fair, like even someone like Bernie would say, yeah, I'll increase your taxes, but we're going to pay for some cool shit for you to get. You're going to get these cool government services. And, I'm kind of on board with that. But with Republicans, right, it's, yeah, we're going to increase your taxes. And, that's the end of the sentence, right? That's not going to be very popular, And I think that, in 2017, there were many moderate Republicans that came out against the more extreme initial provisions of the 2017 tax bill. I mean, even Marco Rubio came out and said, you have to make this more generous for families and increase the standard deduction. That's how we got the standard deduction, was Republicans saying that it wasn't generous enough for lower income families, right? And so I think something similar would happen if something like this was ever actually proposed to be part of a national, actual bill that could be passed. I think that the reality is, like, if the Republicans control the government again, you might have something like what I described. You might like get rid of the payroll tax and replace it with a sales tax. Like, I think the Republicans could do something like that, right? But completely getting rid of income tax and getting rid of the IRS. Like I said, this is a bill that basically you pass to make your base happy, but I don't think I don't think in an actual sort of in an environment where the national conscious is looking at this bill, I don't think that they would propose such an extreme bill, and if they did, I really doubt it would get passed. So
there's also
I just get.
Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say there's also something really contradictory in both implementing like such a huge sales tax. 40% is insane. Like all those European welfare states were around like 20%. And that's like a huge amount of tax income. Basically, well, I think the U.S. is 70% consumption, the money moving around. So all that money suddenly, 40% of that becomes taxes. But then at the same time, you abolish the IRS. So like fraud is really easy, I guess. So whereas either you're bringing in a lot of money to the government, or you're just making fraud really easy. I don't really understand what the end goal there is.
I was gonna,
that's yeah.
I was also going to point out the
one thing is
contradiction between wanting to help poor families and being the party of families, and we need to make our nuclear families better, and then completely gutting all the funding that many Americans get for their families. None of this makes sense to me.
I mean, it's ideologically it's sound for what a lot of these people want, though. We're talking about a people that like are pro social Darwinism. Shout out to a person in the community. We're talking about people that are that believe that people are poor for their own choices, and that it's only up to good Christian people to bring them to God in order for them to be a better member of society. I mean, I don't know how it's contradictory.
As far as
did you walk in with the Bible in your arm?
Hey,
like you're talking about a pretty extreme section of the South here.
I'm talking about a pretty extreme section of the Republican Party. Yes, I grew up in.
I mean, it sounds like.
Honestly, Tiberius can.
Sounds like kind of all of us don't really.
I mean, they're not
like
that popular, if you will.
Wait, are they not that popular? I think they are kind of popular. I live in the South too.
Wait, who's not popular? I didn't follow.
We're talking about,
generationally speaking, is dwindling fast. How's that?
Yeah, to bring this full circle, just so everyone's on the same page, there's a big conversation. We've actually had it here on the show. Is the business part of the right, the part that's like anti-tax and anti-spending, are they as popular as they claim to be? And I'm largely on the opinion that they're not. I think this is an old breed of the Republican Party that is dying out.
Yeah.
But I'm not talking.
Wait.
Hold on.
Hold on. Let me make sure I understood that right. You said.
Oh no.
You said that the Republicans are against taxes, and say that again, Tiberius.
So the conversation is this: there is two big wings of the Republican Party when it comes to fiscal policy. You have the old Republican Party, which was like anti-spending, anti-tax, largely libertarian-minded, right? I think most of them are gone. They're just not that popular anymore. No one seems to like them because they just worship at the altar of money. The other side of this is actually somewhere... no one's been able to nail them down because they haven't wrote policy outside of the tariffs. That's the only thing they've actually gotten in so far. But there is definitely...
to be fair, though, also the stimulus bill. Like I don't think George Bush proposes $2 trillion worth of $3 trillion worth of stimulus, right? Trump passed $3 trillion worth of stimulus money for people, right? I mean, when the 2008 financial meltdown was happening, the stimulus was only a few $100 billion, and it was very, very focused on basically the TARP program, which was kind of a fiscal version of QE, not really something that helped everyday low-income, middle-income people. And so I kind of agree with Tiberius that sort of anti-welfare, anti-government intervention part of the Republican Party is very much dying. And I think that that's evident in part in the weaponization of government by many different Republican actors, right? You see, like Ron DeSantis, I made fun of him in a Fox News interview where he said that banks aren't democratic enough, right? He's like, these banks, they're lending standards. They don't want to lend to gun companies and fossil fuel companies anymore. That's not very democratic. You got Republicans arguing for democratizing part of the economy, which is, last I checked, that was a pretty socialist talking point, right? So it's more a matter of priorities, less so this sort of general skepticism of state action in the economy. I think at this point, I think most parties at this point are willing to spend stimulus money, and I think most parties are willing to use state regulation against companies pretty openly. It's just a matter of what that regulation is actually focused on and where the money goes.
Well, and look look at Trump's reaction to the proposed Social Security cuts. He said, "Do not touch Social Security. Do not touch Medicare." Like he's getting very much against that wing of the party.
Okay, I need to do some clarification here, though. I am not talking about the business wing of the Republican Party. I am talking about populist right wingers that don't want everybody to benefit from the government. When Tucker Carlson says, hey, they're not loaning money to gun companies and oil companies because of this ESG bullshit, all he's doing is complaining about the fact that they're not loaning to companies that he supports. All he's complaining about is that they're not doing the cultural stuff that he wants. I'm not talking about the fact that they're anti-government or anything like that. I'm talking about they want to use the power of the government to do what they believe is culturally necessary. And when I said my part about they're wanting to get welfare because it's not the deserving people and it's not social Darwinist enough, I mean it. They want it to funnel through Christian organizations in order to pass that money on to the people so they can make good, God-fearing Christians. Like that's where it's at.
I'd like to.
That's way off topic.
I'd like to bring in a talking point though from those like business-minded Republicans. 'Cause I read a Cato Institute article on this topic that brought up something interesting. Just like it wasn't specifically concerning the Republican bill, but just generally concerning the idea of a sales or VAT tax. And they were extremely skeptical of that a government would ever truly abolish the income tax and replace it with a VAT tax. They were basically saying that whenever you hear politicians promise you that they're going to replace the income with the sales tax, what they're actually going to end up doing is leave both taxes and just tax you more. Which I think would, like, for people who are against this proposed policy, that could actually be a good talking point when discussing with more fiscally conservative people. Like, do you actually trust the government to like give up all the income tax money?
Well, I was going to say though that this kind of goes on to your point, that this is actually an interesting bill because it does include that prebate, right? So that prebate is an interesting potential shift in like Republican mindset when it comes to welfare, and I think it kind of encapsulates what I'm saying, where in general, Republicans are still pretty skeptical of welfare programs. Like that's totally still true, right? I think that the average Republican voter doesn't really like how America does welfare, right? For a number of reasons. Some of them are racist, some of them are fiscal, right? I mean, whatever it is, right? But part of this bill, though, I think captures potentially what a core group of Republican voters might actually support. And I think that Democrats might actually support something like this, where the prebate is essentially, it's labeled as a tax rebate, and it's basically the poverty level times the tax rate. So in this case, it's the fake 23%. So they give you the lower, not the actual 30%, but the fake 23% times the poverty level just given to every family. Right. Now, I call that a UBI because functionally that's kind of what it is. It's just a portion of sort of the tax they collect that they're sending out in the form of universal checks. Right. But that's also a form of, government cash assistance that disproportionately helps lower income people. And I remember having a similar conversation with a friend earlier that, I'm interested to see if Republicans actually get more on the UBI style train, because there's a very conservative argument for universal cash benefits, right? Oh, these government administrators are terrible. Why just give money to poor people? These are all arguments that you can make in favor of a UBI or some sort of universal tax credit, sort of tax rebate system. And they actually proposed that in this bill. And so I'd be interested to see that, if Republicans do get in power, like I wonder if they do something kind of like, similar Yang proposal where you get rid of a lot of forms of welfare, but you just replace it with some form of cash assistance that everyone gets. Now, the devil in the details of this program is that the cash benefits you receive is less than the welfare you're probably losing out on. And that's probably how conservatives will, go about that in the future. But if they do that and the system actually works, then it'll just take a Democrat to come in office and just raise the cash benefits, right? So you might have a better system that's less generous, and then later on just make the system more generous, which I don't know, that's an interesting prospect. But I think that's kind of where conservatives might be
probably
going,
the most I would give the credit for this bill where it comes to their thoughts on it is that if we can replace the entire old shitty system with something new, then in another couple terms of whoever's in office, it'll level itself out into something reasonable that everybody can get behind.
The actual prebate proposal in this bill is still not good, right? I'm just saying that it does, to me at least, signal a pretty big shift in mindset for the place of government in terms of helping poor and middle income people, right? It does show that at least there's enough of a contingent of the Republican Party that says, actually, it's okay to like give money to poor people. Because for a long time, Republicans would say, you don't give money to poor people because they'll just spend it on drugs and they'll spend it on TVs and they'll spend it on bullshit.
Welfare
But
queens, let's
obviously, right? I mean, exactly,
bonbons.
right. But in this case, right, they've actually proposed, oh no, actually the opposite. We're just gonna literally just give everyone a check, right? And it'll be interesting to see how that dynamic plays out in the future, right? Because I think that
would either
Democrats,
if you stay on the bottom, then you still get a benefit. If you ever get off the bottom, you don't need the benefit. So at that point, you should be able to cover yourself, so to speak.
I feel like that
You just
that
got to
whole
come up with the right income level.
I feel like that whole conversation ignores the biggest impact that a bill like this would have, which is to say it greatly worsens the problem of accumulating wealth concentration. So yeah, you could even raise the benefit to help the poor or whatever, but you're drastically reducing the tax burden on the top marginal portions of the country. They're the ones that benefit the most.
Yeah,
and that means more money is going to flow up, which is going to tighten money because what is a 30% like sales tax do? It's a disincentive to spend. And then but the investors are still going to want money to flow up. At some point you need M1, right? You need some sort of velocity to continue at least at its current pace or better. And I think that what this would do to money velocity, I think, is not great.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. I mean, this bill's bad for the economy. Like, I think this bill's bad enough that if it actually got implemented, it might just cause a recession, right? Because you're right that the retail prices they're so high at that point, 30% higher, right? Potentially overnight. You have to implement this tax at some point. The fucking sales tax is gonna be 30%, right? So when that day comes, right, I think that it would probably be very bad for the economy for a number of reasons. So I agree with that. The only point that I was trying to make with the cash assistance stuff is that the cash assistance stuff in this bill is still bad, and then the bill as a whole is still pretty bad. It's just that it is interesting to see that I do think because of a lot of dissatisfaction with neoconservative kind of thought of, being very pro-intervention, being very anti-welfare, frankly, being very anti-poor in general, right? That's really kind of gone away. And the fact that Republicans are actually seemingly, at least in some limited degree, in favor of cash assistance, it could be that could be a wedge issue going forward, where the Democrats, I think, unfortunately, might take the bait of defending what really is a very bad welfare system. Like, America has a terrible welfare system, and we could be in the scenario where the Democrats are defending a terrible welfare system because they want to be against the Republicans' proposal. And it could lead to a lot of people supporting what is really not like a very good universal rebate system, right? But ultimately, one that people might prefer just because they're sick of how bad the current welfare system is, right? And so if Republicans are able to co-opt that sort of Andrew Yang sort of cash assistance simplicity messaging, I think that's it's definitely an opening for Republicans, and they appear to be taking advantage of that to some extent with this bill proposal.
Do you think the earned income tax credit has a potential to be increased and turned into some equivalent of a UBI?
I mean, maybe, right? It's just that the earned income tax credit doesn't if you don't make enough money, you don't qualify for it, and it's only workers that qualify for it, right? And so
it's the working poor.
Right. And so even if, people who are disabled, people who don't make enough money, right? People, you don't qualify for it. And so in theory you could, right? You could, I think the EITC is a very popular program for a lot of good reasons. But if you look at there's crazy curves of how you qualify for EITC over time. It just looks like the most inefficient, weirdly bureaucratic thing. And so in theory you could. I think that the EITC is just another example of a growing plethora of examples of how, it turns out when you just give people money, it just helps a lot. Surprisingly, when you give poor people money, their lives are better.
But I think it depends on how you give them the money too, though.
No, just cash.
How's it
done?
done?
Wait, hold on. When I say that, I mean if you give somebody $5,000 to $10,000 at the end of the year, or if you get, or you disperse that over the year, I think there's a major difference to me, in my opinion.
How's it done in Alaska? Right, that's probably the closest thing to a UBI we have in this country.
I think that's an annual payment, if I'm not mistaken. But that's
I'm pretty
also a
sure it's
very
annual.
small. It's a relatively small payment
It's
though,
like
especially
2,500, right?
even compared to the EITC. It's relatively small.
Yeah.
But I think that Alaska is an interesting. I mean, Texas has the same thing, right? Texas has I think it's called the Permanent Education Fund in Texas,
Yeah,
which is essentially, yeah, Alaska has like the Alaska. I think it's maybe also called the Alaska Permanent Fund, but that's the oil money goes towards a fund. The fund pays out a dividend to people. Well, in Texas, the oil money goes to a fund, and that fund helps fund our education system. And so,
and also the
you know,
rainy day fund is funded through oil and all of that. It's kind of
okay,
it's kind of interesting, like the way taxes. The reason taxes are so low in Texas is because we tax oil at the wellhead, which means that the burden of that is shared through everyone who buys WTI. So if you're buying Texas crude, you're paying taxes that benefit that go into our go into our education system and go into our rainy day fund, which allows us then to like tax a lot less. And so we're basically taxing the world instead of taxing ourselves. It's
yeah.
a clever
Well,
way of structuring it.
I think
I would push back on the taxing less though, because Texas has got one of the higher property taxes in the country. So
Yeah, I suppose. Yeah. I mean, it depends on who you are in terms
the
of
money comes from somewhere. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
I don't think it depends on who you are about the property taxes. I'm getting taxed out my ass,
Well,
right?
that's true. No, I actually, yeah,
But we
I
have
did
no
my,
income tax.
We don't have an income tax. That's true. I mean, I think I mean, obviously, like, I think it's pretty fair to say the average Texans probably pays less taxes locally and state level than maybe the average like Californian or New Yorker. But obviously, the money does come from somewhere, right? I think that
Yeah.
it is interesting though. If you read a lot of the stuff from the People's Policy Project, Matt Brunig, he's like a socialist economic sort of policy wonk, and he'll use the Alaska Permanent Fund as a example of like, hey, these are conservatives in Alaska. This is a red state, right? But this is a state that has collectivized the rents associated with its natural wealth and pays that money out with the collective wealth of the people to regular everyday people in the form of this check they get, and they like it there. And a lot of states, whether they know it or not, like most people wouldn't think of Texas as a very socialist state, right? But we've got this $100 billion, social sovereign wealth fund essentially that pays out into our school system, which is just another publicly sort of state enterprise system, the public school system in Texas, right? And so I think there's a strong, and I think
and we have Robin Hood too.
Well,
Yeah,
I even
Robin
saw on
Hood.
Twitter. I saw on Twitter the other day. A few conservative senators were talking with a few Democrats to potentially establish a sovereign wealth fund with our social security system, like many other countries do, right? And that was something that I think even Paul Ryan proposed a decade ago. So, it is interesting to see the populist wing of the Republicans become, maybe a bit more amicable to like good tax and spending programs, but obviously, wouldn't quite trust them to draft and pass that bill on their own. So,
Wasn't it? It was Sarah Palin that raised the amount of the sovereign of the Alaska,
the dividend or whatever.
Yeah, she raised it in her governorship.
I have
Nice.
a request from my chat. I usually wouldn't do this, but a lot of people are asking it.
Oh shit.
Econo Boy, could you just give a quick synopsis of what a sovereign wealth fund is? A lot of people don't really know what you're talking about there.
So a sovereign wealth fund is just an investment fund that's owned by the government. That's pretty much all it is, right? So if you think of, hey, I'm an investment fund, right? I want to go buy stocks and I own those stocks, and those stocks pay me, dividends, they pay me capital. If I sell those stocks for more than I bought them for, I get that capital income. And a sovereign wealth fund is just that, but it's managed by the state and the money goes for state purposes. So in Norway, for instance, which is the most famous example, they own basically all the oil wealth of the country. So the profits associated with the oil extraction in Norway goes into a sovereign wealth fund. The sovereign wealth fund managers take that money and they buy stocks and bonds with it, just like any other investment fund. And then the income that those stocks and bonds generate the government takes 3% of it every year, like 3 to 4% of it every year, and basically kind of like a countrywide 401k plan, takes that 3 or 4% of the annual income and uses it to fund various government services. I think that if you did the math, I want to say in like 2019 or 2020 in Norway, anywhere from a fifth to a third of the total public expenditure of Norway is funded just from their sovereign wealth fund. So it's a good way to collectivize wealth and equitably distribute money in a society. In the case where you have a bunch of natural resource wealth or a big pension system or something like that.
I was going to say it's
ironically they've used that sovereign wealth fund to fund EVs. I think plug-in vehicles now have a 90% market share in Norway, and so it's interesting that oil is funding the death of oil.
Yep.
What are you talking about? They're going to power it off of oil. That's the difference. They're going to have EVs power on natural gas.
No, it's going to be offshore wind. For Norway, it's going to be offshore wind.
Yeah.
Well,
Norway is exporting is a net exporter.
Well,
I'm memeing here, and I'm sorry, but there is one follow-up question.
A little bit of KOE in there.
Well, in all fairness, this won't be the Norwegians, but it may actually be the Californians. But that's a whole other conversation. Just one quick follow-up, and I know I shouldn't do this, but Akano Boy, I'm quite curious. You mentioned to it, and I just want you to kind of recap this. The transition, or the idea of transitioning from a sovereign wealth, backwards. The idea of transitioning from the Social Security Trust to turning the Social Security funds into a sovereign trust fund. Would you actually be more in favor of that? Because it's something that I know some people that I think are a lot more economically minded have been pitching around for a bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's kind of it's separate from the funding mechanism, right? So like the pension system in America, obviously we call it Social Security, but the Social Security system in America still would need a lot of money to go into it, right? So you'd still need to get that funding from somewhere, right? So whether it's a payroll tax or a sales tax, that's a different conversation as to what you do with the money that's sitting there. Because at least typically, just good sort of government stewardship of a pension system, you want to take in more money than you're paying out in benefits, if for the only reason that you don't want a pension system to go completely insolvent, right? And at least in the case of Social Security, the reason why they have a pretty big trust fund is because in America, if a department has a shitload more money than they're spending, basically the government will take that money from that department and repay that department with treasuries and just like government bonds and stuff like that. And so the government owes a lot of money to Social Security. They own a lot of bonds, so they get a lot of interest income from that. And so the idea of turning the trust fund into a sovereign wealth fund is just the idea that, well, the Social Security Administration should be able to buy more things with its annual surpluses than just bonds, right? They should be able to buy stocks and other sort of real estate and fixed income and private equity stuff, whatever. Just have a fully diversified wealth fund. That way the returns are, instead of 2%, it's maybe 6 to 8%, and it just extends the solvency of the fund. And also, to be fair, there could be other sort of downstream benefits, like, you do own a lot of companies and, you get to have, make board decisions and stuff like that if you wanted to get super political with it. But in general, it's just a good way to diversify wealth. I mean, that's what I was going to say about Norway, was that Norway is also the best example in the world of just responsibly managing natural resource wealth, right? Because they're taking all the money from one single industry, oil, and perfectly diversifying it, right? If oil disappeared tomorrow, if there was no more oil that Norway could extract tomorrow, right, they would still have trillions of dollars of wealth that pays billions of dollars of income to them every single year, right? Whereas a country like Venezuela or like, any of the other oil-rich countries just get completely fucked when, there's no oil, because they haven't diversified that wealth at all, right? It goes in one hand to the other. And, it's a good way to just diversify your economy in general, to have this sort of collectivized wealth in that way.
I was going to ask, because I'm pretty sure... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry. I've got a meme here that I'm going to turn it all back to you, but there is a reality here that I love this. It is literally capitalism with socialist characteristics. It's fucking hilarious.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, sure.
I wanted to ask, because you mentioned other like natural resource countries. I'm pretty sure Saudi Arabia has been building their own sovereign wealth fund for a while now, haven't they?
Yes.
Yeah, they have a sovereign wealth fund too. I think that the difference though is that they also have. I don't think that the sovereign wealth fund. I could be wrong on this because I'm not super familiar with the Saudi Arabian economy, but I don't think the sovereign wealth fund pays out money to people. I think that what they do is they pay people basically direct benefits from profits of oil, right? So instead of basically diversifying the wealth and then paying a portion of the capital income like Norway does, they just pay you a portion of the profits, right? And the issue with that, in my view, is obviously that well, you're still not diversifying the wealth fully, right? Because again, when Saudi Arabia did a lot better than say Venezuela, Saudi Arabia was a much more diversified economy in terms of their wealth management and in terms of their economy in general. When the oil crisis happened in 2013, or I think it was 2016, but at the same time, they still got pretty fucked, right? And whereas look at Norway, where yeah, like it sucks, profits might go down, sure, but Norway was able to weather that storm significantly better than any other oil wealthy country or any other country. Like Botswana is really wealthy in diamonds, right? But they don't have a very large sovereign wealth fund that backs up their wealth. If people decide that shiny rocks aren't valuable anymore, well, right. I mean, if people decide shiny rocks aren't valuable anymore, then Botswana is going to be in a pretty rough state. So
don't tell them about synthetic diamonds. Sorry.
Yeah, the primary difference between Saudi Arabia and Venezuela and like Norway or whatever is corruption. A lot of it's being taken off the top in those other countries, and not so much in Norway or in the Scandinavian countries.
Well, yeah, that's true. So. Like Norway, one of the things, like Norway has a lot of people get scared by the idea of like, oh, the government, you trust the government to manage all this wealth. And it's like, well, I wouldn't trust any government, right? So you're right. Like obviously, if you did this exact plan in Venezuela, there'd probably be a lot of graft, right? And you'd probably need to build up institutions and democratic transparency a lot more in Venezuela. But luckily, Norway was able to develop this system when they were already like a pretty democratic and transparent country, right? Yep. So it's a little different everywhere, but I just generally I would still recommend something like that to Venezuela or Saudi Arabia, but I wouldn't really expect it. It's just that in countries like America or like Canada, for instance, you really could just do what Norway did and it would work, right? Because the institutions in those countries are already pretty strong. So
Saudi Arabia is doing one thing that they're basically buying other industries and importing them into its country. That's something that's been going on since MBS took over, or more or less took over.
And they're just trying to build their own self-sustaining economy.
Yeah. Yeah. And they're using direct oil profits and keeping oil.
They're going to need it because oil's, at this point, a temporary commodity.
Yeah. Yeah. It's still going to be used in a lot
current
of
levels.
Chemicals, yeah. That's what
Aiko, I'm going to have a conversation about energy with you at some point.
Oh, yeah. I just sent you something, by the way.
Yeah, I saw. It was very neat. Just to wrap up this subsection real quick, is I'll bring it full circle. What is the problematic parts for you guys when it comes to progressive taxation? I'm sure most of you are in favor of it, but to me, I just I'm giving you a litmus test. At what point does it get a little screwy? Like, can you overtax the rich? Can you just openly undertax the poor? Which I know may be a weird conversation, but I'm seriously throwing that out there. Please have at it. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I guess I'll go first. I mean, I think that obviously any tax could be levied in a bad way, right? So just because you like progressive income taxes doesn't mean that you should have 98% tax on income over $1 million or something. Like that would just something like that would just result in a lot of wealthy people leaving the country, or people just flatly wouldn't pay the tax and stuff like that. That could cause people might just not work. Right, if you're going to tax me that much after $1 million, it's like, well, fuck, I'll just retire because if you're making $1 million a year, you probably didn't make, if you're making $1 million this year, you probably didn't make 20 grand last year. Like you're probably a pretty wealthy person already if you're making $1 million a year. So it's like, well, if you're going to tax me that much, I'll just stop working, right? And so stuff like that can get out of hand, obviously. But there's degrees to this. I mean, I think that some people are way too econ brained about like the sort of the sort of marginal effects of taxes. Like I like Micah Irfan's an example of a guy who he would say that progressive taxes are just bad because at each point in the tax it disincentivizes work. But for me, empirically, if that doesn't seem to be the case, right? It seems like you can increase taxes on higher incomes to a pretty decent degree, and it doesn't really seem to discourage work that much. Although he's correct that economic theory would tell you that that would happen, it just doesn't seem to happen in practice. So it just just try to look at what works and do that, and don't go don't listen to, if you're designing tax policy, don't listen to MTG or AOC, right? Probably just listen to the economists of the world. So hopefully that's what people would do. So
Yeah, I'd add on top of the thing of like rich people fleeing. As much as like leftists hate hearing that talking point, the reality is, unless we enter the New World Order and we all are under a single government with a single tax system, it's a prisoner's dilemma. Like a poor country managing to bring in a really rich person because they offer them, like, say, like 0% income tax. It's worth it for them. It's worth it for them. That rich person will spend money in their country. That money will then go into taxes indirectly, and they'll get huge benefits out of it. You can't argue them out of being an attractive place, a tax haven, because there's advantages in that too, especially if you're really behind on the whole like development situation of the world.
Well, but we have a solution for that. The first part of which I think that a very important precedent was set. This is a big Biden win that nobody talks about, is the 15% global minimum tax that he was able to accomplish. You can't flee that. You go around the world, you're going to have to pay. We're talking about corporations now. This is a corporate tax. At least 15%, no matter where you go. So that by itself might not have a massive impact, but it's now an incentive that we can set policy that other countries agree to mimic, so that people can't flee in order to avoid certain levels of taxes. And this is the sort of thing that I can imagine ratcheting up over time. And I can imagine it going to personal income tax. I can imagine it going to some sort of very small wealth tax in the future at some point. But the fact is, we've now set, this is a treaty that was even ratified, and the power of ratification is strong, because now it's going to require Congress and a president in concert to undo if they were to ever try to do it. So this is a strong sort of like ratcheting step that is designed at stopping capital from fleeing in order to avoid taxes.
Yeah, it stops inversion and all that other nonsense that we don't like about the globalized economy.
One of the biggest achievements of the administration, in my opinion.
Facts. Needs to be talked about more. You're 100% right. To Tiberius, to your question, I think.
I'm sorry, I have to ask this because I think it's very important. How many countries actually signed on for that particular agreement?
Most of the West.
I think it's the OECD.
Yeah.
I think it was the whole OECD that did that. And America was the sticking point. Like, getting us to do it was the
yeah, we were the last ones to the table.
What a surprise.
All right. Anyway, feel free to wrap up this section with anyone's closing arguments. I know I interrupted that.
Yeah, so just to answer your question, Tiberius, I think when you get onto the marginal tax rates, I think that's when you can start to see progressive taxation fail. I'm not so certain there is a minimum tax that any one person needs to pay. I think that the whole buy-in, you only care about the country if you're paying into it or something. It's just bullshit. I don't.
Romney called it skin in the game.
Yeah, skin in the game. I don't think people actually look at it that way. I just think that's just resentment of having to pay taxes when somebody else doesn't. But that has its own problems, right? That's why it kind of.
I mean, that's kind of a class divide right there. If you're all not putting money in, then why would you care? There's a level of disconnect that involves there.
It's the makers and takers, right?
Yeah.
And
but
so
but
like Cypher said, but I don't think working class people, middle class people,
way.
or poor people look at it that way. Like, well, why do you think that poor people are the most likely to go into the military and go serve their country? It has nothing to do with income, or it has everything to do with income, because they want to make money. And they're happier to get into that middle class and pay those taxes once they get there. I don't think, but taxing the poor doesn't make much sense to me.
I do think though that like Conoboy said, that once you get into like maybe a 70% rate, like the top dollar, so have 70% of every dollar after $1 million, I think you get it just reeks of unfairness, and it doesn't actually tackle the issue that we actually have, which is wealth inequality, not necessarily income inequality. all the CEOs and everybody that now, especially after Clinton passed that like $2 million cap and then let everybody get stock options thing, it's not income that's the problem. It's people taking assets and using it like income to get around this. That's the primary problem. And there's no income tax. Progressive income taxes don't touch that at all. And that's something we need to fix.
I think I haven't heard from Demon Machine and Osiris for a quick minute, so either one of you.
I got I'm good.
All right.
I mean, what was the question you wanted me to answer?
So the more question is like at what point do you think progressive taxation gets stupid? If you're against it completely, that's fine. I just it was kind of giving a litmus test for the people who largely
it just
were in favor.
depends on how I want to interpret it. If it's to get a psychological motivator to get people to pay stuff because it'll change future outcomes, hopefully, then I don't particularly like taxes being the thing to do that.
Gotcha. And then Osiris,
it seems to artificially stop growth sometimes, and I don't like it.
I don't have nothing on this. The smarter people on taxes already said what they said. Yeah, I agree with most of that.
I'm not gonna be very good at that one.
All right, fair enough.
I have an answer to that question, although it's one I haven't researched recently. But the last time I looked, there's a point at which revenue, when you raise taxes, you get more revenue, but when you raise it beyond a certain point, you start to get less revenue.
Yeah,
and I agree with Cypher that 70% is like the stupid level, but really I favor at 50%. When you cut the top marginal rate below 50%, you don't get any gains from that. But when you raise it above 50%, you appear to be the gains. I don't have the data for that because it's been a long time since I've looked at it. But we found this out during the Reagan administration because we kept cutting taxes, and cutting taxes like raised revenue, and it was because we were cutting it from very large. Like at one point, it was 90% rates for top marginal rate, and so as you cut it, you started increasing revenue. But then once you get to 50%, that effect no longer happens, and it reverses. You start losing revenue when you cut. So 50% appears to be the sweet spot, I think.
All right,
there's
so
definitely equilibrium.
Yeah, I definitely wouldn't disagree with that. Sorry, just trying to bring my notes back up in front of me because everyone is just spamming my inbox for some reason. All right, so without further ado, the second topic here is going to be following up more how we spend our money. Is foreign aid and sending weapons to other countries like laser guided, safe space makers, stuff like that. Is that the things that we want to use our tax dollars for? And if you guys want to open this up to domestic, feel free to do so. But let's tackle foreign expenditures first. And sorry, I'm hitting the wrong buttons here. I'm gonna pass this one off to Cypher first. So go ahead, sir.
Yeah, so I think it really matters how the money's being spent when it comes to foreign spending rather than it being in existence at all. And I think that's probably what a lot of us are going to say. For example, the foreign spending spent on Iraq, atrocious, god awful, didn't help anybody, right? Foreign spending on, let's say maybe Haiti, there's a bit of give and take in that one, right? Ukraine obviously is the question where this is coming from. That's going to be determined later how well that actually happened. But as of right now, it appears that it's actually being a good use of tax money, simply because it's fighting an adversary overseas without utilizing American lives, and also, in defending a nascent, budding democracy that could join the rest of the West, and being a staunch ally of the United States, as well as the rest of the West. So that's it.
Thank you, buddy. I'm going to turn it over to Demon Machine next.
Yo, I would kind of go with a half emotional argument, which is at some point some of us are getting frustrated with being yelled at for being the police of the world and then spending all of our money on doing that. So that's what's kind of frustrating too. But I do agree that we poorly spend our foreign aid for sure. And for the Ukraine question, it's just kind of the principle, I'm tired of war, period. Like, can we just get out of the business? It would be great. That's all.
All right, I got you, man. Next, I'm gonna move it to Osiris.
I stepped away. Is the question, is foreign aid sending weapons a good use of
Yeah.
tax dollars?
Yes, sir.
Uh, that's a hard one. I agree with what Demon Machine said. Like it kind of feels kind of shitty that we get yelled at because why you guys involved with yet another thing, and then when it goes wrong, like, see, you guys did it, CIA spooks, blah blah blah. But on the other hand, you're like, we can't just let some things just go down the fucking hole, because when you don't do anything, like, oh my god, genocide. The United
Yeah.
States did nothing with their infinite wealth. But like, I don't think I think this is a no-win situation, and I think that people have to or the Americans have to, and the American government has to do what they feel is right, even when it might turn out to be wrong.
Gotcha. Sorry about that. I had something fall over, and we're trying to figure out what it was. I'm gonna move it to Ico next.
I do want to address the military component of this question because it seems to be like the main focus. But before I do, I want to talk about foreign aid more generally because I think that was also implied in the question. And it's a very popular talking point in the United States that the best way to save money is to cut foreign aid. And in fact, foreign aid, outside of what's been happening with Ukraine, which is a special situation, foreign aid isn't a big percentage of our budget. But where we send foreign aid, we do to promote American interests around the world. And when we cut foreign aid because of this ridiculous sort of domestic demand to do that, what happens is we pull out of a region, say in Africa or in South America or in Asia, Southeast Asia, somewhere in the world. China comes in with their Belt and Road Initiative and say, oh, America's abandoned you. Hey, we'll be your friend. We'll take your natural resources. We'll build roads and resources in order to ship that stuff out. And American interest around the world gets supplanted by China or by other, like before. Up until this war in Ukraine, like Russia was doing the same thing around the world, trying to spread its interest. So anytime we leave a part of the world because we don't want to spend foreign aid, we create a power vacuum. And there are worse actors than America who are more than happy to fill that vacuum.
Absolutely love that. Thank you so much, sir. I'm gonna move it next to Econo Boy.
Yeah, I think that principally the answer to the question is of course, right? That in general it's of course okay principally for a government to give foreign aid to countries that need it, whether it be military aid or financial aid or humanitarian aid or whatever it is. Naturally, I think that it's just a matter of, well, how does the money actually get spent, right? Now of course, people are very against things like nowadays against things like the Iraq War, even the Afghanistan War, stuff like that. That it appears that even after a couple $1 trillion investment in Afghanistan, for example, a lot of that money, like a really, really significant amount of it, was just corrupt and like stolen, right? That it did resonate with me when a lot of the local government officials of Afghanistan that got their houses taken over by the Taliban were living in mansions while everyone else around them were living in complete slums and in poverty, right? It's not to say that the Taliban taking over is good. I hate the Taliban as much as any group on earth, right? But it is to say that it's clear that a significant portion of the aid that we were giving to the sort of government officials of Afghanistan was not really going to the most productive use that it could be. And that's really unfortunate to say, right? But that's not really an indictment of foreign aid as a general concept, right? That's more of an indictment on just how you might spend foreign aid and like the circumstances by which you deploy foreign aid, especially in a government in a situation like Afghanistan where the people are very, very poor and the institutions are very, very weak, right? You just have to be more careful with how you spend money, right? Now, the situation with Ukraine is like, inarguably a good thing. I think that when people are concerned about overspending, I would just point them to a graph of defense spending over GDP. So like the proportion of our economy that is dedicated towards defense. It's actually the lowest that it's been on record, right? Literally ever on record. The proportion of our economy that's dedicated towards defense spending is the lowest that it's been, right? And at least since sophisticated statistics have been taken about it, right? And so I don't really think that we are, doing a terrible job in terms of managing our military spending and aid and stuff like that. I think that it's a good lever point, and I think that especially with the Ukraine-Russian conflict, if a government like Saudi Arabia or Israel, if they want to be a little bit more buddy towards Russia, it's like, yeah, feel free to buy the shitty Russian weapons if you want, right? And it's a pretty good lever point to have in negotiations like that. So it seems like it's a good way to, contribute to your soft power in the world, to establish yourself as a source of foreign aid as well, especially a country so big and powerful as the United States. So it's why China's doing it. The Belt and Road Initiative in China is just trying to do what I just described. So clearly, every government, pretty much big and powerful government in the world, knows this is a big important thing to do. So America should keep doing it, and just hopefully be more careful with how they spend the money in the future.
100%. I think Tiberius dropped, and
Oh,
his
he did.
stream is no longer up.
You just
his
had
stream
such
is
a
dead.
long monologue.
His
Yeah.
stream
shit.
died. Yeah, I just checked when he froze. Noticed that he froze in the chat. Demon
Is
Machine.
anybody else
was in the
streaming?
Chat too.
I am.
I'm recording it. But I'm
Oh,
not
he's back.
streaming
That's
it.
good. There he is.
He's back.
That was like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it was a bit.
Now that you're back on.
Great answer though, kind of boy.
Yeah, you can make fantastic podcasts.
The best monologue never
Oh, no.
heard.
Yeah.
Oh no, you're right.
It's recorded though, so you're safe.
It's recorded. Yeah, we're good.
Well, okay.
True.
So while we're waiting on Ty to tell us everything's fixed, I just want to say, yeah, I think the answer. I think we have to go affirmative on yes, it's justified to have foreign aid, but then we can, of course, have that asterisk. Like obviously the big defense package that we gave to Saudi Arabia was questionable. Funding the Yemen war, that was one big one that I kind of would claw back if I could. It seems like a lot of the military aid specifically that we've been handing out works well in the European theater, but not in the Middle East. I think it's because a lot of our sort of assumptions, defense assumptions about projection of power have a lot of assumptions in it that apply to the European theater, that in terms of how their political system is structured, what the terrain is like on the ground, is more optimized for that. We try to put it somewhere else, it doesn't work.
I think that the primary reason why we give money to the Middle East and North Africa is just because of oil. Let's be real about it. It's not so much anymore. But back, when it started after especially after the Iran Revolution, it was to make a good friend with somebody to control a large portion of the oil of the world.
Yeah, this is why the EV revolution is such a big deal, because if it occurs, you think about where we get I know the Shell revolution was kind of a big deal for us, but think about where the world gets its oil, and it's mostly from places that we would consider antagonistic to the United States and to the West. Mm-hmm. It's from Saudi Arabia. It's from Iran. I know they're heavily sanctioned, but that's a tremendous source of oil there. It's from Venezuela, and it's from Russia. These are all places that we probably don't want to send the world's economy, make the world's economy depend on them. And as soon as we manage to get off oil, if the world can do what Norway has already done, and in fact, EVs have 10% market share globally now, so it's much higher than what most people realize, and it's growing fast.
It's coming.
At that point, all of those pressure points ease. And I think, fundamentally changes geopolitics if we get off oil.
No, 100%. I think it does play into a little bit of the whole Abraham Accords, which whole other subject. Tiberius, we got to talk about that later. But it was part of the reason about it, when they touted it so much, because if you stabilize the area to a degree and you get everybody off of Israel's back, well, America doesn't give a fuck about the Middle East anymore after that. The biggest constituency for Israel in the United States isn't American Jews, it's American Christians. And if they can have a stable Middle East...
No, American evangelicals.
Okay, fair point.
As a Catholic, I want to separate myself from that crowd.
Fair point. Tiberius, you were trying to talk to us, we can't hear you.
He's breaking everything.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Everything broke. It should all now be fixed. But yeah, I had to do a full reset. So I do apologize for that. But I'm sorry I missed Econo Boy's eloquent soliloquy. I apologize. I hear it was fascinating. And my stream will be forever deprived of that. So
By the way, I see you on Twitch, but not on YouTube.
The YouTube will always host into a second video. So for some reason, YouTube just doesn't connect the dots unless it's like literally a minute in the space.
Yeah.
So yeah, unfortunately, that's a two-parter on this one. But anyway,
I'll send you the file, Ty, so you
Sure.
can just replace it.
I want to move it here because I'm pretty sure we haven't gotten into this past the intros. Just in the amount of money that we have spent on Ukraine, where are you guys at? Has it been a lot? Has it been not enough? You know, has it been too much? I'm quite curious where the panel is on this.
Mint the coin and give it to Ukraine.
Give him Bitcoin.
Did
I'm going to
anybody
concur
get
with
my
that.
joke?
I'm kind of gonna. I know it's a joke, but I'm gonna kind of concur with this idea because to me this seems like a it's not a war between Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between Western ideology and
Yes.
whatever Russia is doing, and we have to protect that. This is why we set up everything after World War II. This is why we are where we are, and I think that needs to be adamantly protected.
Okay, this might be pedantic, but I don't really like phrasing it as Western ideology versus Russia, because that is actually one of the main points of Russian propaganda, of framing it, of Russia versus NATO, Russia versus the West, when at least ideally, outside of Realpolitik, ideally what it is a war about the respect of international law and sovereignty. Those should be universal values. Those should not be considered as just Western values. This is a country that was peaceful, that got its borders violated for no good reason. Those are good reasons to help it and to support it, that have nothing to do with that. Obviously, there's a lot to do with the axes and poles of power in the world, but from an ideal perspective, it should have nothing to do with that.
I think you're 100% correct. I'm American pilled because I am an American, so it makes sense in the way I frame it in my mind. But I think your framing is much better for outsiders who are not American.
Is this a good time to give my regular spiel about the international rules-based order, Ty?
Yeah, I think that's a good segue.
If you want to do that, that's fine. I just want to say, Osiris, you're letting me down a little bit here, man. You got to be like, yes, pro-Western values. You know, come on, you gotta help me out here.
Because I don't care about everybody else. I'll be honest with you. Hey, look, Americans do American things, and hey, look, Europe and everybody else does everybody else things. But we got to have some type of rules and some type of laws, and I think he spelled it out pretty clearly.
Yeah, just an unjust war theory is
all right, before Aiko goes, just I'm gonna inject myself on this one. Is like I hate what you just said on the first part. 100% agree on the second part, but I'm like, yeah, this is a West versus Russia thing. We are the better people. We have a better civilization. We have better morals, and we codify that into something wonderful. Russia is still a repugnant, degenerate piece of shit, and yeah, it is us versus them in that regard. I would 100% or actually go that route.
Okay, there is this thing called the International Rules-Based Order. One would argue that it has been at its most stable from about 1990 on, but it started after World War II, when we realized that when borders move, disaster happens. And we've been working globally ever since then to make sure borders don't move. And one of the times when they did, this was the first Gulf War, when Iraq took Kuwait, the world came together to move that border back. And really, it hadn't happened again, like in a major way, until Russia invaded Ukraine. And so now we have to move that border back, because if we don't, if we set the precedent that borders can move and more countries start encroaching on their neighbors to annex land, I'm talking about annexation here. I'm not talking about just like infiltration or like what America does, like with economic imperialism around the world. I'm talking about literally annexing borders. That's as bad as it gets. If you allow that, then we go back to a pre-20th century world where every time a border moves, there's going to be conflict and there's going to be war. So if you're anti-war, you're going to make sure that this border does not move, because you don't want to set the precedent for all of the other ones.
And I just like to add something, because it's not just for pre-20th century rules, it's pre-20th century rules with nukes, which also is a big game changer.
Exactly, yeah. Yeah.
You
So
don't
if you're
wanna
anti-war, then you want this war.
You don't want to see Kashmir pop off, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Right. And Taiwan and so many other disputed areas, yeah.
Yep. What's the islands in Japan? Anyways.
Yeah, Kurils.
Yeah, that's him. I think we all kind of agree that I think we all agreed. Demon Machine, did you give your opinion?
I mean, it was just the overspending on Ukraine, if anything.
Okay.
That would be because we were kind of coming up with a dollar amount, and it's just I felt like it was way too much. But you guys have different opinions. That's fine.
Well, I want to hear more about that.
Yeah, I want to hear. So, would it change your opinion on the dollar amount if that dollar amount is really kind of just ephemeral, and it's mostly based on the value of the goods that are being sent over?
I would rather give them stuff than send them money, but I'm
that's
more worried about
happening.
the corruption in all of the things because of various things. That's the problem. It's just the corruption part. If you can streamline the corruption, then it's less offensive.
What part of the chain is the corruption? I'm curious about that.
Well, before we get on to that, Osiris,
so unfortunately,
so to Demon Machine, that's mostly what's happening. Government does accrual accounting, and Econoboy can correct me on this if I'm wrong. So whenever we send like a tank that's giving a dollar figure, and the government says we donated that money to Ukraine.
Yeah, I'm sure they also quantify what they send over, but don't they also send over cash?
It's less cash, and it's
how much less?
I want to say it's like 80-20, honestly. But okay. I'd have to do the.
It's overwhelmingly material aid, yeah.
Yeah.
And not just like military aid. It can be there's a lot of humanitarian aid going. There's a lot of different materials.
There could be one of these things of it's a thing that I accept that I just don't like.
Well, no, I just want to I just want to understand your opinion more. So like a lot of people think, oh, we're literally sending Ukraine every month like $1 trillion, and that's not what's going on. I just don't know.
How much should we send them? I know it's like plus 100
I think
billion?
total cash wise, it might be up. It's up to several, at least in the tens of billions. But
is it not in 100 billion yet?
The number that I have is that if you're actually talking like monetary value of given goods, we're now
like
around
at this point.
So the total as far as given goods, which is the big thing that I'm actually going to back Cypher up on, is that like everything is now approaching 130 billion since this whole project started. If you're actually talking about like cash reserves, treasuries, stuff that is spending money and not material possessions and goods, you're like at 15. Like it's actually only been like the line of credit's only been like $15 billion. So a lot of this is literally just jabbing anti-tank missiles and HIMARS and all this other shit. And then someone can correct me here. I think there's some food aid in there.
It just kind of feels a little shitty. Moralistically, it feels a little shitty because I feel like I'm paying somebody else to be blown up to fighting against Russia
that's
instead
fair.
of us.
That's fair.
Like that's you're just kind of distributing death, and that's what bugs me.
Ty, I
get it.
Could you explain something to me?
Sure.
So I've been reading for years that we have this massive surplus of tanks that just sit in warehouses, like thousands of them that keep getting made, even when the Pentagon said we don't need tanks anymore. And that was like all over the news about 10 years ago. And I think it's been continuing since then. So if we have this massive surplus of tanks, why is it so difficult for us to supply? Like we actually made an order for new tanks. That's what we're sending to Ukraine. We're not giving them any of our existing or surplus tanks. Like what's
Doesn't
going
that
on?
make you ask more questions? Like that makes me wonder even more.
That one really does make
because sorry.
I'm sorry. This was addressed to me, so like if someone in the panel wants to answer that, feel free. I'm just
sure. I don't mind hearing from anybody on that.
Okay, so I've got 3 parts here. The first thing about like why Congress will authorize the spending of tanks when literally the Army and the Marine Corps at the time was going, we don't need any more. It's not about fulfilling the role and the doctrine that those particular branches want to do. It's that if we ever shut the line off, it's going to cost 10 times the amount of money to start it back up. It's basically skills atrophy. And as much as a lot of people, particularly who tend to be the anti-military types, are like, what the fuck? Literally, you shut that down and you don't keep it shut down for 10 years or 20 years is how long it's going to take to build up the money to start it back up again.
Oh, no, so, Ty, but that was, I understand all that, but that wasn't my question.
Right. I know, that was just like, that was one of the core things that you did hit on, and I'm like, I have to hit that. So why can't we export all this other stuff?
Yeah.
There's two major arguments that I know. Number one is that you have to basically, what's the word? You have to despecialize the tanks because they're brought up to American standards, but they have tech in them and they have equipment and components that we will not give to anybody. This is why we haven't sold Raptor yet. Even though the Japanese are clamoring at the bit to buy Raptor, we will not sell it to them. To get those tanks to the condition where we want them, you basically have to strip them and rewire them with all new components. So might as well just build new ones. And then the other part of it is there is some cost factors in here. But I think I largely addressed it with the first one. So if I think what I was going to say is the second part, I'll let you know. But that's the big issue. It's just it's really not
specialization is what I was.
Because you got to pull the NVGs out. Yeah, it is a jobs program in which the DoD is actually the best jobs program America ever built.
Yeah.
But when it comes to it, there's a reality here when it comes to national security. There is the NVGs. We don't want anyone seeing. We don't want any of the optical sensors anyone else having, because they are a whole league above what anybody else has by far.
Yeah, if you know anything about Mazant, some tanks are definitely equipped with it so they can avoid things. So
there's also something that I'm not sure how much of that applies to old like U.S. military reserves, but seen, especially right now with the tank discourse, a bunch of Western countries with modern militaries, the more I read into it, the more I see their reports on, well, we can only give this many tanks because like the rest aren't actually even operational. The more I realize that army reserves are, like, on Wikipedia it can be written thousands of tanks, and none of them might be in a state where you can actually drive them. Like the Russian military being the greatest example of that right now.
That
was one thing that I think I was gonna say that was one thing that this conflict kind of exposed about Russia, but also, to be fair, I mean it could expose it about many other countries. Is that
everybody?
Like, it turns out all that defense spending that the U.S. does actually does buy you something, right? That, like, we actually do have really, really by far the best military in the world, and part of that is just maintenance. Like, one of the reasons why Russia struggled in this conflict so much is that they just have a really shitty, not very well-maintained military, right? That a lot of their equipment is shit, a lot of it's older, a lot of it hasn't been maintained properly, right? And they don't have a lot of it, right? And whereas if you compare that to the United States, I mean, we really aren't hurting in terms of the quantity and quality of our equipment. Like, American soldiers are pretty damn well equipped, right?
I tell that to some soldiers, but I get your point.
I mean, compared to Russians, I guess they would be leagues above.
Like, I mean, you've got your MREs, right? You've got your basic sort of equipment that you need, and you're not given guns that don't fucking work, right? It's kind of fairly minimum standard. But the truth is. Well, the truth is,
I was gonna say, tell it, Steve. There's some problems. It's not the problem that we don't have the money. It's the problem of the distribution of that money. It's a distribution problem.
It depends on the unit, and this has gotten better since Iraq. So it's really
well. I mean, yeah, but in general, though, I think Iraq wasn't in general, like, how do I put this right? The actual sort of military to military conflict in Iraq was not really close. Like the fourth largest, Iraq had the fourth largest military in the world at the time, and the U.S. completely and totally decimated the Iraqi military and government. Like, the issue in that conflict was the sort of prolonged occupational status of the military and the guerrilla warfare, right? That's something that technology it's hard to deal with, but in general, though, the U.S. military is pretty well maintained. And the only point that I brought that up was just to say that this conflict kind of exposed Russia a lot, but also that's where a lot of countries like Germany, for instance, made historic investments in its military, because I think in part a lot of countries realized, like, oh yeah, we're really not very well prepared for conflict for an assorted number of reasons. So we really need to make those investments. So.
Ooh, I have a question.
Just for for the people that might be watching, the reason I made that joke is because during the beginning of the Iraq War, some people were going without plates in their.
That's why I backed that joke up. Yeah, there are
there
problems,
was issues,
but
that's
we
not a
we
thing really
we're
much
by
anymore.
far the best military on earth. But there's some logistical issues. We'll say that.
So my question is, what if Ukraine keeps going after they defeat Russia?
Why would they do that?
That would be funny.
Like, what if they
why would
take
they do
Crimea
that?
back?
Going where? Where are they gonna go?
Crimea. What if they take back Crimea?
Oh,
That's
what they
I mean,
want
in
to
case
do.
of that,
That's
right? They're
keep
not
going.
Yeah.
Well, I mean,
yeah, that's in their right. I think.
Okay,
I think most people think that.
Is that border movable?
That's
Yeah,
within that's their border. That's their shit.
Okay.
Isn't it?
So
moving back.
that would be them taking back territory, but I kind of
Okay.
get maybe
So-
what you're saying because
well, yeah,
Russia
but,
gave it
like-
to them in the 70s, I guess. I don't know. Like
The real question here is that, depending on the numbers in which you believe, the province of Crimea, which was technically annexed by the Russians back in 2014, so a lot of Ukrainian nationalists do believe that Crimea is Ukrainian, but a lot of Russians actually say, wait, that's actually proper Russian. It's over 65% ethnically Russian, yada, yada, yada. The long and the short here is that, would the invasion of Crimea step up to the next level to where the Russians are like, oh, now you're invading us. You're not just taking back your own land.
Now you're
So
justifying them.
if anyone wants to get in on that, feel free.
Yeah,
I would
I
say
think. Oh, sorry,
fuck
go.
them.
Go ahead.
Okay, that's an answer.
Not even jokingly, because once Russia invaded eastern Ukraine, all bets were off. Like that's just how you have to look at this. Now, what is Russia like if they go into Crimea and actually start liberating Crimea back for Ukraine? What's Russia going to do with its military that's not able right now, as we're seeing, be able to control a small sliver of land that connects Russia land-wise to Crimea? Like they're gonna get it cut off. Like what's
Well,
I don't get it. Like,
I have an actual question. Is there a natural border between Russia and Ukraine that is of any significance once they take back Crimea? Is it like
Just a
the
line on a
entire
map.
eastern section of Ukraine borders Russia directly. And that's where most of the fighting is.
But I mean, is it
a
like
bit further
plains or
west.
is it mountains or?
It's as flat as Kansas.
Mix. Yeah.
It's a river.
The only defensive advantage is mud.
Okay. Well, I was just curious, like where they'll make the artificial border this time when they stop pushing Russia back. I guess they'll honor the initial borders.
That's the hope, is that they'll
That's the
honor
hope, yeah.
the pre-14 borders before the Little Green Men incident.
And
I
for
mean, the
what
reality
it's
is, like,
worth,
I don't.
sorry,
I don't think the Russian. I was gonna. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh, sorry. For what it's worth, I think it's also important to point out that like the West really doesn't want Ukraine to start invading Russia. That's the reason why we don't give them weapons that have like the capability of really striking into Russian territory. There is this really like tacit decision to keep the fighting within the borders, and that the goal is just to restitute the original borders.
Well, the question is, this is not clear to me at least. Does Ukraine actually want to invade Russia in any capacity, even taking back Crimea?
Well, that's what I was going to
think
say.
they do,
That I don't think the Ukrainian government and the Ukrainian people want to invade actual sort of Russian territory. Now, Crimea is not legitimately Russian territory, right? So there's no, if they, it's not an invasion of Crimea, right? It's trying to take back land that was already originally Ukrainian in the first place, right? And to be fair, like even if, like I don't know, if the government of Ukraine really decided like we're gonna take the fight all the way to Moscow, I just think that's something that the international aid would stop if that happened, right? I just don't,
Right,
I
I
just don't
assume
think
that would
there
happen.
Would
But,
be any
like,
appetite for that. So
What if they thought they could do it with all the
well,
equipment?
they'd have to do it without any.
They can't do it
continuing-
with the equipment they have. They've
They've made agreements with these Western countries that they would not go into Russian territory. Now I shouldn't say that. They are if they don't use like long range missiles that were given under those conditions, then they might be able to, because Russia has now started taking to they've learned their lessons from all of these depots that have been blown up by the Ukrainians, which was brilliant. They started putting their depots now behind the border in up to like 100 miles into Russia. So if you like Ukraine does occasionally send it, like they had this drone that they attached a rocket to and and sent it into attack a Russian target within Russia, that worked. But that wasn't any of the like high tech that wasn't any of the weapons that were given conditionally that you can't use inside of Russian borders. So they can do it, but they can't use any of the stuff that they get from the West in order to do it.
Maybe I'm wrong on this, but it doesn't seem to me that you can secure any land inside of Russia with what we've given them, and without then a full scale air war, B. So I just doesn't make any sense to me for them to
They
push
don't
in
have
Russia.
They also don't have the manpower. They simply don't. They could do what Russia did, an excursion into Russia past the whatever parallel it is, but probably not more than like 50 miles. Like that's just what it's going to boil down to. Like that, I could see that happening during a push and be like, okay, like now then people are like, okay, now we got to settle this, and then Russia's told to like you got to figure this out, and so is Ukraine. Yeah.
Okay, here's a related question. If Belarus does something wonky, could Ukraine go into Belarus? Like that's not Russia.
That would
They're
be
not a nuclear power.
I think that they won't, simply because it removes their moral reason for basically existing. It would basically be in the same line of like, well, Russia invaded you, you're going to invade Belarus because something Belarus did. So I don't know. I don't think it's
hypocritical.
Well, I'm saying if Belarus chooses
yeah.
to join the fight, which they haven't so far, although they keep promising Putin that they will, they're kind of being a little.
I think fundamentally it just comes down to that. I don't think strategically there's a lot of appetite from the Ukrainian government or from international actors to invade actual Russian or Belarusian land, right? That it doesn't, like, from a strategic standpoint, there's probably not a lot of capability and like resources to do that, especially when you're waging a defensive war in the first place, right? And I don't think that Ukraine, especially with the political axis, I think that they did something like that, they would do that with the understanding that they would probably lose a significant portion of the aid that they need. I think that one of the things that is people don't really think about, especially with military aid, is that a lot of the aid that you get when you're from like the United States militarily is equipment and like maintenance of that equipment, right? I've seen analyses before that the U.S. actually has like a really, really large amount of military control over Saudi Arabia, if for the only reason that if they stopped giving aid to Saudi Arabia, the Saudi Arabian government would not be able to maintain the sophisticated equipment that the military of the United States has given them, right? And I think similarly to Ukraine, because so much of that aid would go away if they invaded sort of actual sovereign Belarusian or Russian territory, their military capability would go down so much, and their defensive posture would go down so much because of a lack of an ability to maintain a lot of the equipment that they've probably been given. So it would work out so poorly if they did that. And also there's not really a lot of reason to do that anyway. They're currently seemingly winning the war. So, probably just keep doing what they're doing. So I don't really think that's a big risk of basically Ukraine escalating the conflict. So.
Yeah,
I want to
just to bounce off the word appetite. My analysis of what Belarus has been doing since the start of the war is really towing the line. Like obviously Lukashenko is a puppet of the Kremlin, and he needs to pay lip service to the Kremlin. He let the Russian troops stage for the first plan of the war, the blitzkrieg attempt on Kiev and all that stuff. But ever since then, he's been doing nothing. He's been actually as close to neutral as he can afford to be. And I think that's pretty telling, actually. He has no appetite for this war, it seems like.
Yeah. Tiberius,
yeah, I mean... Oh, okay, go on, sorry.
No, go ahead, Accountable. I have a subsection I'm going to move this into when it comes to foreign spending.
Yeah, I was gonna say though that it is interesting. Like the international response has actually been like almost. It's surprising how universal the condemnation or the lack of sort of pro-Russian invasion rhetoric there's been amongst different international actors. Belarus is an interesting example, but like people have pointed out, like Kazakhstan, for instance, taking a anti-invasion stance when historically they've been very much aligned with Russia, in part because they want to be more Western-facing and they're democratizing as well. China released a statement that said they believe the territorial integrity of Ukraine and that they were not in favor of the invasion explicitly by policy, right? Which was a big move. I think India, same thing. India's historically held pretty close ties with Russia for various historical reasons, and they came out not really in favor of the invasion either. And I think part of that is that it's sort of international rule-based order, like I forget, like Rich was saying earlier, that countries just generally have a lot of reasons independently why they don't really like when countries invade other countries, right? So like India wouldn't want to come out in favor of the Russian invasion because they don't want to give Pakistan an excuse to invade Kashmir, right? China, same thing with like stationing troops in Taiwan, right? And there's a lot of reasons why most like governments wouldn't come out in favor of this invasion, and it's made Russia so much more of a pariah than they were previously. It's pretty shocking, I think.
If anyone doesn't have anything further, I want to do a bit of a lightning round real quick, and I'm going to give some people tend to be anti-arms, and so this will be a little bit more against the left, and then I'll get into foreign aid. But as far as the military, more particularly sending weapons to certain actors, I'm quite curious where everyone stands on these three countries. Just you're rapid firing out. It will be Saudi Arabia, which is seen as problematic. It'll be Israel, which is seen as problematic to some people, and as another example, the Kurds. Remind you that if anyone is pro-Kurd, they are on the international terror watch list on a number of countries. So, round the house, do you agree with all of these bad, or some of them good, some of them bad? So feel free to have at it.
When you say the Kurds, you're talking about the YPG specifically, and not the Kurdish in Iraq, because you said they're on terrorists. So I just wanted to make sure.
I kind of left that a little more open-ended, so you feel free to hit that as you want, but just the Kurds in general, right?
I mean, I would say that my answer to all three of those would be pretty much the same, right? It's just that I'm okay principally with giving a lot of military aid to countries like Saudi Arabia and Israel. It's just that, the aid as leverage only works if you actually use the leverage, right? And I think that that's what the U.S. government across multiple different ideological administrations have been criticized for, is that like it seems like Israel and Saudi Arabia do a lot of bad shit with the aid that we give them, and we don't really seem to call in that leverage as much as we probably should if we really care about protecting international human rights. And we really believe the idea that, hey, this aid is a form of leverage that we can use to get reforms out of, get countries to do what we want them to do, right? And that's where I think that, we probably should just leverage that relationship more than we currently do to try and protect the human rights of like Palestinian people, or to protect obviously the human rights of many different people that are affected by the Saudi government, both foreign people and domestic citizens of Saudi Arabia. The line that I said earlier of like, especially with this current state of the Russian military, it's like, hey, Saudi Arabia, if you want to buy weapons from Russia, you can, right? But you can see where that gets you, right? I think that that's something that should probably be said a little bit more often to the Saudi Arabian government. So,
anyone have a problem with the people we send arms to, or sending arms at all?
I would say that I have a problem sending arms to Israel, to Saudi Arabia, to the Kurds. Depends on the situation. Generally speaking, I'm pro, but YPG and some of the other groups that are actively engaged in terrorist or freedom fighting activities in Turkey, it makes it more problematic. For the same reasons Economy said, like, Israel treats the Palestinians like non-citizens, non-entities in their country. They're slow moving words I can't say because I don't want to get people banned. things that are going on in Israel right now, especially with the new BB government taking power. And Saudi Arabia's always had problems.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, with Israel, I said I was talking to a friend earlier, and I was like, it's with this new BB coalition, it's getting very hard to say that situation's complicated. It's getting very hard to just take a centrist neutral stance on the Israeli-Palestinian issue, especially with this new government in Israel. It's like, no, it seems like Israel's seems like they're kind of just in the wrong on this one, So that international aid should probably be called up at some point. So
I want to I actually really agree with you, Boy. Like the leverage should be used, but I also keep when I run through that in my head, I also just keep running into the problem of the power, like world power of balance thing, where we kind of see it with Turkey too. Turkey's a NATO member, but Turkey also really likes to deal with Russia. We have that problem with every single, maybe not with Israel, but like with Saudi Arabia as well. Those countries really like to play U.S. interests against any other foreign interests, whether they be China, Russia, or any other power. And that is how they get out of having to buckle to leverage, because they will use their friendship as leverage against the USA in the first place. So how do you even deal with that?
I mean, I don't know. I think that in general, right, the U.S. government just has to take a much more sort of explicit stance against countries like that. I think Turkey's probably the most interesting example, because I think broadly Turkey can be relied on for important international issues. I think, like, sure, right, Erdogan is, he buddies up to Russia oftentimes from a self-interested perspective, but I think that the reality is, there's a reason why I think Turkey did send a lot of aid to Ukraine and still is, right? Because Turkey does want to be pretty Western facing. Now, the more interesting, like, hard example is maybe like Hungary, where Hungary seems to be adopting a much more explicitly just we don't fuck with the West stance, right? Whereas Turkey's a bit more ambiguous. So for a country like that, it's hard to navigate around because, like, as far as I'm aware, there's not really a process for expelling members from NATO. Right. And the EU, I think, had a similar problem when they were running up with all those problems with like Poland and Hungary and like Italy and Greece during the crisis, when a lot of people said we got to get rid of like Greece and Italy in the EU. But I'm not sure if there's a defined process for even doing that. And so it's a little bit more difficult. But, the truth is, I think it still just comes down to the same fundamental issue, which is just, having those conversations and leveraging that. It seems like a lot of like government officials are just kind of scared to really have those tough conversations and leverage that relationship. Like, I don't really think in the grand scheme of things, if Turkey gets really mad at the US for doing something like that, I don't really know what the big giant consequence is, right? You know what I mean? Like,
well,
same
control
thing
of
with
the
Israel,
Bosporus
right? So,
is their one of their big geopolitical like levers that they can pull, right? Because now
it's not that there would
Russians
be no
can't get in and out
consequences.
of the Black Sea. So the reason they lost their flagship, they lost a few other ships, they functionally don't have a navy anymore. If Turkey decided to open up the Bosporus to the Baltic fleet to come in, that would have a big impact on the war. So I think that's one lever for sure.
No, that's totally true, right? But I think that at the same time, we were talking about Belarus earlier. We're like, why isn't Belarus taking a more explicitly pro-Russia stance when Belarus is pro-Russia in like every single way? I think part of it is that Belarus realizes that Russia cannot really make up for the complete hole that would be created in their economy and civic life if these financial and different sanctions applied to Russia also applied to Belarus. And I think similarly, right, if like a government like Turkey or Saudi Arabia came around to a conversation that I'm describing and said, okay, yeah, well, we'll just be totally pro-Russia now. It's like, okay, well, I mean, like I said, have fun maintaining your military. You won't be able to do that. Your military is going to go to shit. And also have fun with like all of the incredibly crippling sanctions that would probably hit you when all of these different international actors realize, oh yeah, it turns out that Turkey, an economy the size, smaller than Italy or something, we can sanction them just as hard as we did Russia with much less negative benefits to us and much more negative benefits to them. I mean, the leverage is just so in favor of Western actors in that circumstance that I just wouldn't really be particularly nervous about that prospect. I mean, maybe someone more informed would tell me like, oh no, actually it would be Turkey has way more leverage than you think, Hungary, same thing. But I really just don't think so.
I think you're right in the. Oh, sorry. I just wanted to like respond real quick. I think you're right in like this ultimatum situation where like they completely align with the enemy. We hit them with the hardest sanctions, but no one would actually go there, right? Like someone like Turkey, someone like Saudi, or a country like Turkey or a country like Saudi Arabia, if they were going to align more with Russia, they would do it in a lot more subtle ways than just completely switching sides. They would still play a little bit, because we're talking about leverage. Like they would like make concessions to Russia, and then we would have to make concessions to them just to bring them back to neutrality, for example. That's like we can't even start talking about human rights when we need to fight to get them to agree with us on geopolitics. Is the issue?
I'd agree
Well,
with that.
yeah, that's fair, right? But again, I think that that's where, in my view, right, the leverage is just really, really in favor of those Western actors, right? And I think that the reason that a country like Belarus has the position they have is because they do realize that it would be so much worse for their country if they were targeted, even financially and economically, like Russia was, compared to if they were fully in support of this Russian invasion, because Russia is a much worse, for assorted number of reasons, geopolitical partner than the United States, right? I mean, forget about potential ideological alignment. Just you'd rather the U.S. be in your camp than Russia for a number of reasons, right? And I'm just, I'm pretty skeptical of, I'm pretty skeptical of the, what sort of these more, neutral actors really taking the side of Russia or China in these circumstances. I mean, after all, when Trump was president, he pissed off literally everyone. It seemed like at the same time, still there was a pretty broad, consensus of like, hey, I don't really like what Trump's doing, but also, not really going to do too much about it, right? Like, it's like, yeah, the steel tariffs on Turkish steel sucked, but it's not as if Turkey had a complete meltdown over that and tried to reshape their fundamental policy, because they still rely on America for so many things, even when a completely insane person like Trump is president. So,
Yes. If I was to take the opposite approach, the devil's advocate approach to this, and say why, uh, some of the things that America doesn't, the foreign aid that they do, sending weapons, etc., is not a good. Iran Contra, which led to what was it, Nicaragua situation, which led to the war on drugs situation. That I think that is a very good position on saying, well, it can go wrong. Not saying that
yeah,
it typically goes wrong, but that is a situation where it did go wrong. 100% went wrong.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, there's definitely examples of foreign aid being used poorly. It's just, in general, when libertarian types are like, oh, we just shouldn't have foreign aid, it's like, well, that's probably not good. But of course, there are examples of foreign aid being used improperly and, leading to bad outcomes, right? So,
Yeah, of course. That is the minority. I just wanted to point it out. It does go wrong for the people who think that America is just the best thing on earth. We fuck up too.
I want to make a very American argument about it. It's not about the foreign aid is not what's good and bad. It's the person wielding it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I think that's true.
We didn't get to talk about it, and I know that we're probably not going to be able to fully explore it, but how do you all feel about USAID, the actual group of people that control U.S. foreign aid to other countries? Because there's been
I don't know
issues
enough about
with
them.
that. Okay.
Are they? Well, well, maybe you can maybe teach us a little something. Is USAID, is that kind of like an NGO situation, or is that actually an agency of the federal government?
I think it's a public-private partnership. But of both.
Okay, yeah, I don't know enough about it to really comment. I know that I want to say Trump actually established a new sort of like Belt and Road style infrastructure aid agency. But in terms of the structures of those I have no idea if they're. I mean, I really have no idea if they're really that bad. I haven't heard any big news stories about them, but maybe
Well,
maybe there is some bad stuff.
There was problems with who manages or was given management of funds. Especially during the Haiti disaster recovery in 2010.
What happened?
Essentially, the Clinton Foundation was giving control of a large section of it, and then because of the graft that existed in Haiti, and as well as everybody trying to get a piece of the government contracting to make money for their own businesses, a lot of that money got wasted, or didn't at least trickle down into the actual local economies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that sucks. Anytime a scenario like that crops up, I think that's just a that's just the role of government to try and fix those circumstances, right? It's similar to when people say that like there's welfare fraud. Like, yeah, I mean, sure, there's some portion of welfare that is indeed fraud, right? But that's really just an argument for a better welfare system, right? Not an argument for not having welfare. Right? Similar to like if there's problems with USAID or any of these other organizations that administer aid, it's like, okay, well, let's just figure out what those problems are and go from there. So
I personally have some issues with USAID, not in its principle. I really like the fact that the U.S. has those kinds of organizations set up and is offering aid to various places in need. But I remember reading the story a couple of years back where I had to deal with because of debating with tankies, and they kept bringing up USAID as this like presenting it as this like CIA conspiracy to get into countries and fuck shit up. And obviously in many situations that's completely untrue, but unfortunately there have been situations where USAID operations were actually cover-ups for CIA operations, which it sucks because it completely decredibilizes the whole organization, and now countries which may be more or less antagonistic towards the US are justified in refusing any USAID intervention at all, which is terrible for humanitarian reasons. And like I don't know, like the CIA should have never touched it. If something's humanitarian, you just got to leave it to be humanitarian. You can't start like slipping in agents anywhere.
Yeah, what is Peace Corps specifically sectioned off away from military and Secret Service, or not Secret Service, I'm sorry, Secret Squirrel people. You're not allowed to join Peace Corps for, I think they changed it. It used to be permanent, and then I think they changed it to like 5 years until after no longer having a clearance because of that situation.
Yeah, I mean, unfortunately, I think when you're talking to people like that, you do have to bite, you do have to bite some bullets. I guess I shouldn't say unfortunate, because I think it's very reasonable for anyone to recognize that your government has done things wrong in the past, but that it's possible without an extreme like tanky revolution to solve those problems, right? And I think like a go-to example is the IMF for the same types of people. Like, oh, the IMF does this and that to fuck over countries, right, and stuff like that. But obviously, those same people ignore the modern history of the IMF, which basically seems to reject so many of those past policies that they advocated for, which wouldn't be possible if the model espoused by people like that is, the model that they espouse is like country capitalist, country hate socialism, therefore organization hate welfare and hate all socialist things, so destroy country. That's basically the model that so many tankies will espouse. But it's like, okay, but if that's the case, why does the IMF endorse capital controls today? Like, why do they endorse active labor market policies, which is just another word for welfare, right? Why do they say you shouldn't cut health and education spending now when you're talking about trying to rebalance fiscal situations in these countries, right? Oh, it turns out it's because, the IMF is, was operating on a mistaken assumption about economic values and beliefs that it would develop countries if they did these things. Turned out that was wrong, and they changed a lot of that ideology for the better, right? Tankies are just really ideologically motivated. Same thing with a lot of people, right? I think a lot of people, unfortunately, a lot of people don't just come out and say, I just don't like these things, right? And if you just don't like something, if you want to have like a philosophical argument like with an anarchist or something, at least that makes a little bit more sense than saying, oh yeah, these things actually just don't work, or these things work this way, but they actually don't. That's a much more post-truth style argument that is a little bit frustrating with a lot of online internet types. So
sorry about that. Hey guys, I'm always in favor of bashing on tankies. It's one of my favorite things to see. It's one of those things we can universally agree is the good of humanity. But we are largely out of time at this point because we only go for 2 hours. We only go for 2 topics. We will continue with an open panel, so if anyone wants to stick around and roll in, feel free to do so. Remind you that this wonderful, wonderful panel is brought to you by contributions through people like Jakander, who is now my producer, along with the wonderful people who have come onto this panel today. Thank you all very much for joining us, but also viewers like you. And yes, this is not a PBS commercial, but what you guys do very much helps. We usually shoot for $60 every time we do a Saturday Night Lights, and we have gotten our goal literally every single time. I didn't ask for it last weekend because KOE. I'll just blame Phil. I do not believe that Phil gives normal standards for us. But yeah, we provided you in the entertainment. So if you guys would like to help us out.
Hold on. You're paying us for Phil, right? For the Phil thing. You're compensating everyone who had to watch us.
Sure. Anyway, without further ado, thank you all very much for joining us. We're going to be moving on to that open panel. If you are interested in joining this particular conversation, let me know. Before we do that, is there anyone who cannot stay with us, who needs an outro?
I gotta walk my dogs, so.
He has to walk his dogs with his really pretty shirt. But I also want to express how disappointed I am in not getting to the red pill conversation. That's what I came here for. I
was hoping for that one.
Yeah. But I still love you, Ty. It's cool.
we can 100% hit the open panel. Like that is absolutely what we can just roll on into.
Cool.
So yeah, absolutely. So Cypher, if you come back, that'd be great. But if not, if you go ahead and give yourself an outro, because I know them doggies take a while.
Yeah, so hey everybody, my name is Cypher. I stream under the moniker of Crowdsourced Politics. We do a Thursday news roundup show every Thursday starting roughly at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, going to roughly 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, covering the news that was of the last week with the kind of analysis only the crowd can provide. So if that's something you're into, you can check us out on Twitch and YouTube. And I generally speaking, I cut up the news segment into various different forms and put them up on other social media. Tiberius, thank you for having me on this program. It's always a pleasure to be here. Everybody, you go donate money to Tiberius, please. He does a good service for the Twitch community, and your contributions would really help him out. I will be back for the program. I might just talk to y'all while I walk my dogs, but yeah, I gotta get going. So, thank you.
I appreciate that. Next, sorry. Oh, I see why my stuff was a little off there. I'm sure it's pretty late for you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I would love to stay, especially if you're going to do the masculinity thing that's like 4 a.m. And
yeah.
And I also have plans. There's going to be the Chinese New Year parade in like 8 hours, and I want to go like film it and live stream it. So I'll have to be up in a couple hours. But thank you so much for
more interesting. That is much more interesting to do.
It'll be fun, but I'm sure you guys are going to have a great conversation. Thank you so much for having me. Love talking with you. Love meeting new people. Had a fun convo, and yeah. Bye-bye.
Always a pleasure, sir. Take care. Demon, were you sticking with us?
Yeah, I'll stick.
All right. Changes in the unification independence stances of Taiwanese. Oh yeah, I'll check that out after. All right, thanks for watching. Hope you had fun. Let's raid Tiberius_D. Is that his Twitch, like his exact Twitch again? Dude, I need to like actually have a canned outro. Like I don't have a prepared one. So like I never feel comfortable doing the whole like this is my channel, this is what I do, blah, 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 blah. Yeah, it's Tiberius_D. Okay, cool. And so then I never do it. And, oh, God. Anyways, yeah, thanks for watching. Thanks for admitting the tankies were right about CIA and USA aid. Like, look, I'm gonna throw a little curveball at you. Unlike you, I actually face the facts when I see them, right? I love you, buddy. Thanks for watching as well. I know we disagree on a couple things, but I appreciate the convo. Unfortunately, I couldn't really talk with you when I'm on panel. When I'm talking with people, I'm focused on that, not so much on chat, unless there's like TOS stuff. Earlier, I had to ban a guy because he's being fucking racist. Hey, we can talk about the Ukraine war anytime. I saw you were discussing like the Newland phone calls, stuff like that. Those are interesting topics. I'm down to have that discussion anytime. Typical ignoring chat, lol, hahaha. You're used to it anyways. All right, yeah, thanks for watching. See y'all. Have fun with Tiberius. Go watch him. Go tell him, go tell him about the Newland phone calls. I'm sure he'll love that. All right, bye-bye.